I mean, I was there when we read Harriet Washington's book on medical apartheid. And I just remember Johns Hopkins coming up so much. And I was listening to the president of the HBCU, the local HBCU today, and she was very, very pleased with the fact that the HBCU would be partnering with Johns Hopkins. And during the presentation, everyone seemed to be quite impressed. But if you don't give people the movement and the movement of memory, they keep repeating the same mistake. Johns Hopkins was the first research university in the United States. They're situated in the area that was a hub of slave pens, slave jails, whatever they call them. Baltimore is still like 40-50% black people. They did so many experiments on black people. Right now they want to act like, we just really want to do things correctly, but they set the standard for the mistreatment of black people in medicine. They really did.
Time now for StoryCorps. In the 1960s, Vivian Thomas ran a research lab at Johns Hopkins Hospital, helping invent groundbreaking surgical techniques, even though he didn't have a medical degree. Thomas was also a mentor to black laboratory technicians at Johns Hopkins. Two of them, Fred Gilliam and Jerry Harris, came to StoryCorps to remember the man who changed their lives.
It was mind-boggling. I had no medical experience, and he took me under his wing, and he taught me everything I needed to know. Back then, there was smoking allowed in the buildings, and he would always have his pipe. He'd peep over your shoulder, and he wouldn't hesitate to say, well, you're getting ready to make a mistake. But when he would puff on that pipe, smile, and walk out, you knew you were doing your job.
Yeah. He had patience. He would never raise his voice.
And he obviously saw something in me that I maybe didn't see in myself. I remember that was the one time in the critical part of the operation, a doctor became ill and fainted. Vivian was walking by at the time, and I'm standing there, and he said, well, no, you go ahead and finish it. And I was stunned, but I wasn't shocked. I think that was one of the days that I grew up as a surgeon. He was an excellent mentor, and he was a father figure. The very first car I had purchased, somebody hit me in the rear, and I was without a car for 2 weeks. So he came by my house every day and picked me up and took me to work. Never accepted a penny.
I think Vivian's greatest accomplishment was just training and mentoring young men. But we weren't appreciated, I don't think. How many people knew that there were 26 black technicians in that lab and what they were doing?
I feel blessed and privileged to have been part of his history. If I had the opportunity today, I just thank him for being who he was in my life at that time in my life.
That's Fred Gilliam and Jerry Harris, remembering their mentor, Dr. Vivian Thomas. Gilliam later worked for the American Red Cross. Harris stayed at Johns Hopkins as a coordinator in the School of Medicine. Dr. Thomas's pioneering research and innovation helped lay the groundwork for modern heart surgery. In 1976, he received an honorary degree from Johns Hopkins Hospital. He died in 1985.
I swing my beach at the playground, Come on, y'all, let us show this in effect. Put your hands in the air, put your hands in the air. I want you nobody sitting in that chair.
28 million children in the U.S. do not have a playground within a 10-minute walk of their home. And children from lower-income neighborhoods tend to have less access to parks and playgrounds than those in high-income areas. But as special correspondent Kat Wise reports, a nonprofit is working to end those play space inequities.
What did you do in school today?
I went on a playground.
After a long day at work, lifelong Baltimore resident Brandy Walker often takes her kids to one of their favorite places in the neighborhood.
Oh my God, I'm gonna get dizzy!
The Harlem Park Elementary and Middle School playground. It's a fun place to be, says Walker's 11-year-old son, Jordan.
My favorite part is when I'm on the spinning thing and the monkey balls. I like to play with my friends and my family.
But this colorful playground wasn't always so fun.
In previous years, the playground was, to me, sad. There was just a black top in the field. The playground didn't allow the children activities to build gross motor skills.
Many of Baltimore's playgrounds are in need of a makeover. This year, a citywide assessment found 112 playgrounds at schools and parks in the city are in poor condition. Most of them are in neighborhoods with predominantly low-income communities of color.
People of color are absolutely disproportionately impacted by place-based inequity.
Lisa Ratliff is the CEO of Kaboom, a nonprofit started in 1996 that's helped build or improve more than 17,000 playgrounds around the country, including Harlem Parks in 2016.
Because of historical and racialized disinvestment in our communities, kids don't have places to play in their schools or near their houses. People of color have suffered, and people of color have experienced lower budgets, lower resources, and quite frankly, lower prioritization in making sure they have what they need to thrive.
She says now more than ever, play spaces are needed as many children cope with mental health issues due to the pandemic.
The science tells us that our well-being, our physical, our mental health is affected by having great places to be outdoors, connect with our earth, connect with our fellow human beings, that there is really no stronger remedy to physical and mental health and what we call a sense of belonging in community.
We know what's possible here.
Ratliff recently visited a playground about to get a makeover with officials from Baltimore's public school district and the Recreation and Parks Department.
So there are actually going to be two play spaces here.
Kaboom partners with local government and community organizations to identify neighborhoods in greatest need of a playground, and then helps find funders and facilitates the planning and building of the playground. Members of the community, including kids, also play an important role, providing their input on designs and helping on build days. Earlier this year, Kaboom received a big boost, $14 million from philanthropist Mackenzie Scott. Playgrounds have recently been built at Butterfly Park in Milwaukee, Chinatown in Philadelphia, and in San Francisco's Heron's Head Park, where kids now play in a nature-inspired space. But Baltimore has been a big focus. More than 40 playgrounds have been built or improved there over the last 2 decades.
As a young person who grew up here in Baltimore, living in Park Heights, I know how much rec and parks facilities can really help young people. Go, go, go.
Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott says he appreciates Kaboom's partnerships with his city, and he wants to do more. $41 million from the American Rescue Plan have been designated for upgrading Baltimore's parks and recreational facilities.
Developing a playground is like developing a child to grow into their full self. They're going to be in a safe place, right? They're going to be able to be physically healthy. It helps with their mental health. It allows their family to experience things. It's a sense of community that they get from being with other folks. And that's what you need to grow healthy and safe communities.
In April, Kaboom launched a new $250 million initiative with the goal of ending place-based inequity in 25 communities in the next 5 years. What does that look like? A high-quality playground near every child's home or school, according to Kaboom. Baltimore was the first city selected for the new program. More than 50 playgrounds will be built or improved in the next few years.
This is a solvable problem. It is fairly low cost and high impact. We can make some significant advancements that don't just have immediate benefits, but have long-term benefits for our communities and our kids.
Back in Harlem Park, Brandy Walker says her neighborhood's rebuilt playground has helped her kids and her.
When we come to the playground, I just feel safer, and I'm able to relax and debrief from the day before going home and starting our evening. Good job, Taylor, up top.
For PBS News Weekend, I'm Kat Wise.
That's the way we overcame the Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch. Oh, yeah. That's the way that we became the Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch.
High inflation, the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, grown children moving back home, issues that remind us how, for all the ways that we're different, Americans have a lot in common right now. Today, NPR's Alana Wise reports on how one black family keeps perspective and thrives during these times.
A fluffy white handful of a dog greets visitors at the Farron's house.
This is the only biological child we have together, and his name is Ash Farrons.
Tyrone Farrons and his family are a tightly knit, blended group. Between Farrons and his wife, Michelle, the family has 6 children.
I have 2, and my wife has 4, and so we're like the real-life Brady Bunch.
Since the start of the pandemic, 2 of the couple's adult children have returned home. The children saw their finances stunted by the pandemic, while it energized their parents' professional growth. Michelle had been a retired respiratory therapist. When the pandemic hit, she found her expertise in high demand.
They were offering large amounts of money for people to come to these hospitals, but it was out of necessity.
But the money alone wasn't enough to put Michelle in harm's way.
You have to believe in something. You have to have a love for it and a heart for people to do it. It's not money that gets you to go and do things.
While Michelle worked the front lines, she and Tyrone came up with a plan.
While she was doing that and I was doing the things that I was doing, we could afford to build this home, our forever home.
Tyrone Farrons picked up extra shifts for his work as an electrician. He worked over 115 hours in 2 recent pay periods.
Just gave me less time to miss her. It was a lot of sacrifice because I would see my wife one weekend every 2 months. And while she's gone, I just worked because there became a lot of opportunities for overtime.
The family's success is a far cry from where he started his life. Farron spent years of his early adult life selling and addicted to drugs. That time saw him land in correctional facilities across the country. He estimates he's been arrested about a dozen times over the years, spending about 1.5 years incarcerated.
It changes the way you view everything. My dog goes to the groomer and he's in a cage for an hour, I get upset. It's such a miserable experience.
Farrons outlines his once bleak reality from his bespoke home in Maryland. The 6-bedroom, 5-bath house with a pool and 2 ponds in the backyard was built during the pandemic, a testament to the Farrons' financial success. After his last stint of incarceration, a 6-month bid for felony assault in 2007, Farrons had an awakening.
When I got released, I was determined because I had sons that I didn't want to continue in that line. I wanted to change my life.
Tyrone Farrons was trained in the Navy as an electrician. He was dishonorably discharged after a failed drug test. But since getting clean, he reconnected with his teenage love, Michelle. They share their new home with Farron's mother, 2 children, and 1 grandson.
I think it's just made me aware of how fortunate I am, to be honest with you, because the things that my mother sees that would impact her, she's on a fixed income. So when you raise the price of milk or a half a pound of bacon, it affects her.
Tyrone makes sure his mother, Patricia, has everything she needs. That includes costly dental work. The family's children have also needed extra support during the economic downturn. Again, Michelle Farrons.
We get calls weekly, seriously, just for gas, and they haven't had to do that before. It is scary because we don't know what's coming. How long we can keep it up.
Issues like this and his time behind bars inspired Tyrone Farrons to become politically active. The Justice Department says that more than 650,000 people, like Farrons, are released from prison each year. Unlike Farrons, many of those returning citizens will be rearrested within 3 years of their release.
Everyone deserves a second chance. Because you make a bad decision, you do your time. At some point, you paid your debt.
Tyrone Farrons was able to take advantage of opportunities to put him on the right path. Opportunities he says others should be afforded as well.
Mr. Farrons, you may begin.
He testified in 2017 to the House Ways and Means Committee.
It bothers me because I feel as though my son and my children are still paying for that mistake.
in regards to the opportunities that I have that would affect their lives and our living situation.
His 2 children at home are now both training to become licensed electricians.
I would just see him at work, and I would just be amazed by the amount of things he would talk about, or the amount of things we would see, or people we would motivate to be doing what we're doing.
Andre Lee is Farron's 22-year-old son. The two aren't blood related, but they share an undeniable bond.
Although he is my stepfather, he is my real father at the end of the day because of what he's done for me in my life. It's because of him that I can call myself a man and be proud of it.
Lee lost his job a year ago at a juvenile correctional facility. He says he was racially targeted. He gives this example.
There was a CO that literally said, as I'm getting checked in, she was like, "You look like you're supposed to be in here."
He filled in the gaps of losing his job, picking up work at McDonald's and DoorDash. But when Lee's roommate lost his job, Lee made the difficult choice to move back home.
I felt like I failed. I felt like I didn't do what I was supposed to do with the opportunity that I was given.
Lee now rents out that house, a property that he had bought from his dad. Farron said his daughter, Regina, lives on the basement level.
That was going to be my man cave down there. I got a 100-inch screen that comes down. It was going to be my man cave thing. Kids need a place to stay. That's far more important than a man cave.
The family keeps perspective. Michelle continues her work in healthcare. Lee does volunteer work for the less fortunate. And Tyrone Farrons is a passionate advocate for human rights, including things like banning the box for returning citizens. The family will vote in the midterm elections, motivated by issues that impact their loved ones most. Alana Wise, NPR News.
This is Steph Curry, the world's leading expert on cryptocurrency. I'm not. Okay, quit messing around, man. Give me some tips on crypto.
No. Back in 2014, Samson Williams got some advice from a coworker that would change the trajectory of his life.
He was like, "Samson, here's 3 things to improve your life. Get on LinkedIn, wear better socks, and buy some Bitcoin." So I got on LinkedIn, bought myself some Hello Kitty socks, and bought some Bitcoin in 2014.
And it was that last thing, buying $200 worth of Bitcoin, that sent Samson down a rabbit hole. A few years later, by 2017, he saw hundreds of other new cryptocurrencies being created. He saw the world's first Bitcoin billionaire get minted, and it felt like it was becoming a mainstream thing. Samson became a true believer in the coming cryptocurrency revolution. Samson is black, by the way, and he says one thing he was particularly excited about was this growing idea in some parts of the crypto community that crypto could be a driver for racial equity.
We're going to change the world here.
That was a few years ago, and since then, Samson's view of crypto has changed a lot. And that was even before the massive crypto crash this year.
Retail investors, particularly in black and brown communities, they've been sold the sizzle, but there ain't no stake there. And we're the first group who loses out.
This is The Indicator from Planet Money. I'm Adrian Ma. We've been digging into crypto this past week, and today we're going to focus on black investors. In a recent survey by Ariel Investments and Charles Schwab, 25% of black investors reported owning crypto, compared with just 15% of white investors. And other surveys tell a similar story. So today on the show, what's driving that adoption? And what does the current crash mean for this idea that crypto could be a building block for black wealth and help close the country's longstanding racial wealth gap? When Terry Bradford saw the surveys showing black consumers embracing crypto way more than white consumers, she was a little surprised.
It didn't intuitively make sense to me that that was actually happening. And I was like, no way, that can't, that can't be true.
Terry studies payments systems at the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. She says part of the reason she was surprised is that black consumers are a lot less likely than their white counterparts to invest in the stock market or retirement funds. For a lot of reasons, which all lead back to systemic racism, African Americans in general have less wealth to invest.
Whether it's income, home ownership, home equity, investments, black consumers are almost always at the very bottom of all of those measurements.
Terry wondered why an outsized proportion of black consumers seemed to be drawn to this relatively new, relatively risky digital asset. In her research, a few themes emerged. For one thing, she says, a lot of black consumers are distrustful of traditional financial institutions. And you don't have to look too hard into history to find examples of why. She said, take, for example, the Freedmen's Savings Bank. Congress chartered the Freedmen's Bank in 1865 after the Civil War. Tens of thousands of formerly enslaved people deposited their money there, but those in charge of the bank were white.
The folks that were responsible for running the bank got into some pretty risky, perhaps shady transactions, and in the end, basically lost all of that money.
The bank collapsed. Many depositors lost all their savings. And Terry says this is just one early example of how financial institutions have failed or mistreated or discriminated against black consumers. In the middle of the 20th century, you had decades of lending discrimination, aka redlining. Then in the early 2000s, you had predatory lending in black neighborhoods, which helped lead to the Great Recession, which wiped out a huge chunk of the country's black wealth. And to top it all off, add the microaggressions, or in some cases, the Uber aggressions a lot of black customers have faced while banking.
That type of thing lingers, but it does generationally have an impact. And this distrust is there. Some folks feel the financial system just is not working.
A recent estimate of the per capita wealth of white and black Americans pegs the wealth gap at 6 to 1. And those researchers say the gap is getting wider. Terry says crypto might seem to some folks like an opportunity to catch up, an alternative path to financial freedom without banks or government control, where the barriers to entry are low. And crypto marketing has helped carry this message.
The digital rebellion is here. Old money is out. New money is in.
Celebrities like Spike Lee, Megan Thee Stallion, LeBron James, and a whole lot of others have appeared in ads championing the virtues of crypto.
It's been hyped pretty well by athletes, entertainers, so folks that look like us, right? That do things that we do, that talk the language that we talk, that share some of our common struggle.
And while Terry is not completely anti-crypto, this hype does worry her.
The folks that can stand to lose the least are the ones that are going to get hurt the most. And there are no guardrails around this right now.
The value of cryptocurrencies worldwide has plunged about 56% in the past 3 months. That's according to coinmarketcap.com. Even so, some people believe that cryptocurrency can still be a building block for black wealth. Tanya Evans is one of them.
Here comes this new asset class, and it doesn't require permission to participate.
Tanya is a professor at Penn State Law, and she teaches classes on cryptocurrency and blockchain technology.
So many people talk about the risk of getting into crypto. I am one of the people who talk about the risk of not being in it. Even as a black queer woman in this space, what opportunities can we have if we lean into the language of the future of money? And that's what I think this space presents the opportunity for us to do as Black Americans who are going to move the needle and hopefully stay ahead of the curve.
Now, in recent months, lots of people have lost money. She doesn't want to diminish that, but Tanya still believes it is relatively early days and that cryptocurrencies and the technology behind them, blockchain, they're not going away. In the meantime, Tanya says she wants to see more consumer education around cryptocurrency and more consumer protections. And on that point, Samson Williams agrees. You remember Samson from the top, early Bitcoin adopter, Hello Kitty socks, but he's coming from a very different angle.
You're seeing that people are spending their hard-earned money, their paychecks, their rent on these digital quote-unquote assets that have no underlying value.
Today, Samson describes crypto as a Ponzi scheme.
If you want to sustain your faith-based currency, the best way to do that is prey on the uninformed.
Samson says he sold off most of his crypto holdings a couple years ago, but he still has a foot in the space.
He has a consulting business where he focuses on blockchain. And so while he still sees some promising uses for the technology, he's no longer betting on crypto as an investment or as something that's going to help solve the racial wealth gap.
The day someone says, here's how Bitcoin or crypto solve unemployment and a living wage, then I will take them seriously. So if you don't have a job, you don't have the disposable income to invest. And so Bitcoin doesn't address human rights, civil rights, voting rights. Before I got out of the Church of Bitcoin, I did pretty well, but I'm still a black guy in America. Is Bitcoin going to help other black and brown folks out of the vestiges of unchecked capitalism? No. Why? Because that's a political decision.
In other words, Samson does not think that crypto is going to help spread the wealth. And there's actually early economic research to suggest the wealth already in crypto is pretty concentrated. According to this one study that looked at Bitcoin, they have the 0.01%. The researchers estimated just 1/100% of Bitcoin investors held more than a quarter of all the Bitcoin in circulation.
The farmer in the dell, the farmer in the dell. Hi-ho, the dairy-o, the farmer in the dell.
Barbara Norman farms on land her grandfather bought in 1945 in Covert, Michigan, after his family migrated north from Mississippi, where they were sharecroppers. Today, it's known as Barbara's Blueberry Batch.
These are blue crops. They are traditional. Everybody loves blue crops. They're sweet. They're not as large as those.
In March of 2021, Barbara got a letter from the U.S. Department of Agriculture that lifted a huge weight off her shoulders.
United States Department of Agriculture Farm Service Agency said is going to pay off $385,657.56. This has been promised over a year ago.
And that's only one of the promised payoffs. In total, the FSA promised to relieve Barbara of about $500,000 of debt she owes them. She's taken out loans from the FSA to buy things like equipment for her farm. But the relief hasn't come. She's one of thousands of farmers across the country who's waiting on the debt forgiveness after it was signed into law last year under the American Rescue Plan Act. Since then, the funding has fallen into legal limbo after facing multiple lawsuits from banks and from white farmers alleging discrimination. When the letter arrived at Barbara's house last year, she says she felt an overwhelming sense of relief. But now she worries it will never come.
And it's got you in a limbo. Because, see, then you missed a year or 2 years because you're waiting for this to get paid off. But you realize if they never pay, you've got a farm, you've got to do whatever you've got to do.
This isn't the first time Barbara's waited on federal relief money. In a famous case from 1999 known as Pigford versus Glickman, black farmers sued the USDA for racial discrimination. The resulting pair of settlements allocated about $2 billion for black farmers. Barbara filed a claim, but was denied. She was told she was not discriminated against and therefore wasn't eligible for a payout. She wonders if history will repeat itself.
If this American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 is not adhered to, not taken care of, it says volumes of distrust, volumes of things, of hurt, of pain to the farmers of color in America.
And it could have real consequences for her farm. Because before she got the letter from the FSA relieving her of debt, they were threatening to accelerate her loans or face foreclosure.
Are you scared of losing your farm?
I don't want to, and I pray every day. And no, because I'm going to keep fighting.
Over the past century, black farmers have lost more than $300 billion worth of farmland, according to one study, due to the USDA's discriminatory lending practices. Barbara's determined not to let that happen to her farm. But she says she won't pass it down to the next generation unless it's debt-free. So without this federal relief, Barbara's blueberry batch could be lost in yet another preventable closure of a Black-owned farm. I'm Dana Cronin, Harvest Public Media.
A terrible thing to waste. Environmental racism and its assault on the American mind. Written by Harriet A. Washington.
Well, ABC 13 has been following some environmental issues in your neighborhoods, and that includes the cancer cluster in Kashmir Garden. And now people living in the Carverdale neighborhood in Northwest Houston are voicing their opinions on expanding a landfill in their community. ABC 13's Derek Lewis is live near the site of where that landfill would go. Derek?
Melanie, neighbors say this is a historic neighborhood. Businesses are coming in and adding value to this area. They say opening and expanding this landfill will hurt their progress. People living in this Carverdale neighborhood are fighting to stop this landfill from becoming larger.
Over the years, when they first brought the dump in, it started to deteriorate our community. It started to make the value go down, and we fought hard to get it closed in. So it closed down. Now they want to reopen it.
Vincent Lewis is the pastor of Greater Macedonia Baptist Church. He's been in this community all his life and has seen how businesses have come in to turn things around. He says this landfill will make things worse.
Now when we have companies coming in to upgrade it, you want Waste Management now to come in and stop the upgrades that we have going on.
The community does not want TCEQ to give USA Waste of Texas landfills permission to move forward with the proposal. The commission is listening. In a statement to ABC 13, TCEQ said, at the conclusion of the comment period, all formal comments will be considered before a decision is reached on the permit application. Reverend Lewis says the details of the proposal would create an eyesore.
It goes up as high as 12 to 15-story building. And so now, within the next 5 to 7 miles, all you'll be able to see is a big old dump of trash.
Now, there is a public meeting tomorrow at Sterling Banquet Hall where residents can come and ask questions as well as voice their concerns. Live in Houston, I'm Derek Lewis, ABC 13 Eyewitness News.
Could have told Indians that. Same thing. Some of them did start off with, but then they got attitude. Say, no, we're going to take it all. You know, we ain't going to leave you nothing. Right? Indians said, well, you know, I thought we were going to share. I mean, you know, that's what we sat down at Thanksgiving, I mean, you know, and say we all work together and all like that. Well, I don't think that's a good idea. I think what I need to do is going back to giving you a good whipping, Chief. That's all it was. Chief said there's plenty of land here for everybody. We got more land than we can take care of and whatnot. So, I mean, we welcome you and all like that. Well, no, I'm going to take it all. Give you a bottle of whiskey. That's what you're going to get out of the deal. Right.
Wow.
And that's what they did. And they admit that they did it. They wrote books about it, bragged about it. Yeah, how many Indians were killed today, you know? Only good Indians are dead Indians.
In the coming months, the University of Minnesota is expected to release a report detailing its treatment of indigenous people going back to its founding. Melissa Olson reports that the project follows an investigation into how the U and other land-grant universities were enriched by Dakota and Ojibwe land.
The U of M project is made up of fellows appointed by tribal nations, University of Minnesota graduate researchers, and faculty who've spent the past year conducting research on the relationship between the university and tribal nations. The Truth Project, which stands for Towards Recognition and University Tribal Healing, began last year. The project came about as tribal nations in Minnesota learned more about the Moral Act of 1862 through investigative reporting by Tristan Ottone and Robert Lee at High Country News. Journalist Tristan Atone.
We had found was about nearly 11 million acres of land that originally belonged to indigenous tribes and communities that had been acquired by the United States through about 250 different treaties, many of them outright land seizures, many of those treaties backed by violence, and that those lands had basically been divided up for 52 universities.
High Country News estimated the grants raised almost $18 million for university endowments, with unsold lands valued at more than $5 million. Adjusted for inflation, that land was worth about $500 million today. In Minnesota, the Dakota conflict would come to a violent end just 6 months after the Morrill Act was passed in 1862.
What was more shocking was that it literally took almost just over a month for the state of Minnesota to execute those men at Mankato and turn their lands into a source of income for the University of Minnesota. It's egregious.
Dubbed the Minnesota Windfall, the university received over 94,000 acres under the Morrill Act. The land was appraised between $5 and $10 an acre. Sales and leases raised nearly $580,000 for the university. Through the session of 1851, the Dakota were promised 2.4 cents per acre for the same land, a sum that was never paid. Dakota land benefited more universities than any other, raising money for 34 other universities across the United States. Professor Nick Estes is joining the faculty of the U's American Indian Studies Department this fall. His ancestors were exiled to South Dakota following the Dakota conflict. He says the Truth Project is an important opportunity for the U of M and other universities to reflect.
Oftentimes as Indigenous people, we are asked to provide receipts for dispossession, and I think especially when it comes to higher education, the Morrill Act provides the receipts for how the modern public university system was founded and how it was funded through the selling of native land.
Professor Tad Johnson recently retired from the university where he led the Truth Project in his role as Director of Graduate Studies at the University of Minnesota Duluth. Johnson has been working on building relationships between the U and tribal nations for the past decade.
Reconciliation is way, way down the road. What we first need to get is the Native American perspective on their relationship with the University of Minnesota through the years.
Ann Gargiola is a graduate student researcher helping to organize the Truth Project. She says the Truth Project is an opportunity for the U to understand its impact on tribal nations.
As far as what the Truth Project is, a lot bigger than any of us anticipated when we started.
Gargiola says part of the work of researching these issues is the ability to shift the historical narrative in ways that center Indigenous ways of knowing.
Places like the University of Minnesota are considered experts, preeminent thought leaders. This Western hierarchical education system that we're in automatically values our research practices and our ways of knowing as being less than. And so the oral histories that are being collected, we see them as just as valuable, if not more so, because they have not been listened to.
The Truth Project's report is expected later this summer. For NPR News, I'm Melissa Olson, St. Paul.
Idaho can be a wonderful place to live, but today we're going to talk about 10 reasons you might want to avoid this place.
There's just a week left in Pride Month, and this year has seen an unprecedented level of threats directed at LGBTQ people. This includes the recent arrest of white nationalists headed to an event in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. NPR's domestic extremism correspondent Odette Youssef was there, but she says the events she witnessed that day are part of a larger story. Odette, remind us briefly what happened there.
Yeah, we were there to cover a Pride event, Juana, that had been attracting some really violent reaction from the right online. By the afternoon, it was looking like everything actually had gone okay. But then we got word of these arrests happening nearby. So we raced over and saw a huge swarm of police and sheriff's deputies around a U-Haul truck. Turns out the Patriot Front members had been packed inside. So obviously this was a major story, but I think it was one that overshadowed a deeper story in North Idaho, Juana, about how that community has actually confronted far-right violence before and what it takes to do that.
Tell us a little bit more about that history.
Well, back in the 1970s, a man named Richard Butler bought 20 acres of farmland outside of Coeur d'Alene in a place called Hayden. He turned the property into a compound for neo-Nazis, and that organization was called Aryan Nations. It wasn't big. At any given time, there were maybe 1 to 2 dozen people living on it, but it was important. The Aryan Nations compound came to be a hub for organizing the violent racist right. Every year, they'd gather Klansmen, neo-Nazi skinheads, and others for conferences. It was also a problem for the locals, though. In the 1980s, Aryan Nations began a crime spree and even tried assassinating prominent local figures. And here's the thing, this continued, Juana, until Aryan Nations was actually bankrupted in 2000.
Bankrupted? How did that happen?
Well, to answer that question, let's go for a car ride with a local lawyer named Norm Gissel.
You saw the driveway there? There was a big wooden structure over the top of the driveway. It says Aryan Nations, whites only.
The road that Gissel took me along was where a terrifying story began in July of 1998 for Victoria Keenan and her 18-year-old son. They were heading home one night after a wedding in Coeur d'Alene, and Keenan's son had dropped something out of the car. So they retraced their path along the road. So some of the neo-Nazis at the Aryan Nations compound heard the car backfire. They started giving chase, shooting as they followed the Keenan's vehicle. Up the road, Gissel showed me where the Keenan's rear tire blew out.
And she skidded into this ditch right here. She was right here. And then the Nazis then surrounded her car, and the window was down. They started beating on her, hit her in the ribs with the rifle butt. Her son was was cowered into the well of the passenger seat, and he was being beat on, and they were screaming.
Gissel and other community members who'd been organizing against the Aryan Nations wrote to the Southern Poverty Law Center to share the Keenan's story. The SPLC took the case and ultimately won a $6.3 million judgment. This not only rid the community of the compound, but it showed that Richard Butler had badly miscalculated when he thought that North Idahoans would allow their community to become a hub for violent white extremists.
We were able to completely rid ourselves of that group and the kind of awful culture that they were trying to present to our community.
That's Coeur d'Alene's mayor, Jim Hammond, speaking 2 days after the Patriot Front arrests. But many people in that community disagree. They say extremism is once again making its home in North Idaho.
I have heard people say it feels like when the Aryan Nations were at its peak. It feels like that.
That's the voice of Jessica Mahurin. She says in the last couple of years, Coeur d'Alene's seen a resurgence of far-right activity. Mahurin's the only paid full-time staff member of the North Idaho Pride Alliance, which organized the Pride in the Park event. For weeks leading up to the event, she, her board members, the event's vendors, and public officials were the target of what she calls an organized right-wing intimidation campaign. There were voicemails, emails, and even reportedly a death threat sent to a city official. Mahurin felt that this just made it more important to move forward with the event.
We are here for many reasons, and none have to do with hate.
So on a drizzly Saturday morning, Pride in the Park opened.
That means you hear protesters, you see them, they're talking, they're making you upset, you disengage, you be louder.
From the beginning, there was an acknowledgement of the threats.
This is our pride. This is our day, and nobody is taking that away from us. Can I get an amen? That's right.
But this time, it was more than just protesters talking. A few minutes into the event, we see a figure pacing back and forth near the gathering. He's in full camo, sunglasses, a hat. A mask is pulled up to the bridge of his nose. On his back, he carries an automatic rifle. He doesn't share his name with NPR.
I don't like this event. I'm protesting that. And I'm also here because I'm sure Antifa will be here.
There was actually no sign of anti-fascist activists. The Pride event was mostly locals gathering to celebrate their identities. That makes no difference to this armed protester.
There's so many places you can go and celebrate this. Why Idaho? Everyone is fleeing from states to try to have one conservative haven, and yet it ends up here. So where do we go from here? Do we go to Alaska? You know, there's not a lot of other places we can go.
Are you a native Idahoan?
I am not a native Idahoan.
For decades, North Idaho and some neighboring states have occupied a special place in the imagination of the far right. They envision the region as a conservative haven. Native and longtime North Idahoans say it's a big place. They have a phrase, live and let live. But that's become harder because lately the calls to arm have been so extreme. That bothers Christy Redfield. She's brought her kids to the Pride event. Earlier that morning, she saw a flyer for a pro-gun group gathering nearby. They were rallying under the false narrative that LGBTQ people harm children. One line on the flyer jumped out. It said, quote, "If they want to have a war, let it begin here." She asks Michael Birdsong, the group's leader, what he meant by that.
You want to bring war to us? You bet we will defend ourselves.
I don't hear anybody else talking about war except for your marketing. Right, well, your marketing mentions war and your full two-way encouragement.
You're going to have to wait your turn.
Encouraging people. I know, I'm not going to. I have the right to free speech myself. You do. And so I'll walk away, but I'm going to say one thing. In your marketing, you wage war. In your marketing, you're encouraging guns. That's violent.
Redfield and Birdsong didn't end up arguing about their different views on LGBTQ people. They disagreed about whether it's safe and right for civilians to arm themselves when they disagree with their neighbors. That day in Coeur d'Alene showed just how volatile things could get when you mix false hyperpartisan narratives on social media, permissive state gun laws, and a sense of grievance among the far right as a Democrat occupies the White House. But Kate Bitts of the Western State Center says it would be a mistake to look at North Idaho as an outlier in America.
We really see Idaho as kind of a bellwether state.
Bitts' organization tracks anti-democratic movements and groups in the Northwest. She says Idaho was among the first to propose a ban on gender-affirming care for youth. It failed in 2020, but a similar ban has been introduced since then and may well pass, as it has now in other states.
If we're trying to understand where the anti-democracy movement is headed, Idaho is always useful to look at. But that's also true if we want to look at what the pro-democracy movement is doing.
The pro-democracy movement. Locals say national media often miss this part of the story. When Aryan nations tried to make North Idaho its home, there was an unexpected side effect. Civic organizations began popping up throughout the Panhandle and neighboring states. They focused on protecting and advancing civil and human rights. Christy Wood heads one of those groups, the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations. She says the recent influx of far-right residents from other parts of the country has made tensions worse. Among those migrants are avowed white nationalists. This time, they don't wear Nazi uniforms. And they have had some success forming relationships with certain elected leaders. But Wood still thinks these newcomers are finding out the same thing that Richard Butler and his Aryan nations found decades ago.
What they find when they get here, though, are people like us, our organization and all the citizens in Coeur d'Alene and Kootenai County that absolutely do not embrace that.
And that's what some of these transplants will tell you, too. Like Ben, he only gave his first name. He was out protesting the Pride event and said he moved here 3 years ago as a conservative, quote, refugee. What was the North Idaho that you thought you were moving to? Is this what it looked like in your mind?
No, not only is it not the Idaho I was expecting, it's not the country anyone was expecting.
It's a country that's becoming more diverse, racially, ethnically, and one where people of different gender identities and orientations have, over time, been able to live more openly.
That's NPR's Odette Youssef, who's still with us. So, Odette, it sounds like even if there had not been a U-Haul full of white nationalists on the day of that Pride event, there still would have been a big story unfolding in Coeur d'Alene.
I think so, Juana, and it's worth noting that the Patriot Front arrests wouldn't have happened if a concerned community member hadn't seen those men loading into that U-Haul truck. And when that person called police about it, The police had already had weeks of working closely with community members and organizations to be primed for this kind of a threat. It's really kind of similar to how Victoria Keenan was the single person whose experience decades ago brought down Aryan nations. If she hadn't been able to tap into a network of organizations that were primed to uphold the law and track these threats, things might have been very different.
All right. NPR's Odette Youssef, thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Black babies cost less.
Today on the show, the silent crisis in America's maternity wards.
African-American mothers dying at a higher rate than any other racial or ethnic group from childbirth-related complications.
We're also hearing from doctors who say they now fear that the maternal mortality rate will go up.
Americans die due to pregnancy at a higher rate than any other developed nation. And since the fall of Roe v. Wade, access to quality health care is top of mind more than ever. Black people are 3 to 4 times more likely to die due to pregnancy than their white counterparts. Jamila Taylor is the Director of Healthcare Reform and Senior Fellow at the Century Foundation. Hi, Jamila. Welcome to Reset.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
So we just mentioned in the introduction here, Jamila, that this country has the highest maternal mortality rate than any other developed country. How is that possible? How did we as a nation get here?
Right, absolutely. Well, first off, I think, before we even get there, we sort of have to ground the conversation in the fact that, these maternal mortality rates that we're seeing in this country fall heaviest on women of color, particularly Black women. Black women are about 3 times more likely to die of pregnancy-related causes when compared to white women, and this is largely due to a history of systemic racism, both within the healthcare system as well as broader American society.
Mm-hmm.
Black women just tend to get poorer health care when compared to other communities. So I think that is part of the problem. I think another thing to lift up, too, is that, this country, we actually spend more per capita on healthcare than any other country. And the fact that we have the poorest maternal health outcomes in the world is pretty ridiculous, to be honest. And so to make a long story short, we got here because of racism in the healthcare system. And again, I think even when we look at white women and their healthcare outcomes, I think we can also point it to sexism and gender discrimination in healthcare as well.
So, we know people of color were hit harder during this pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Experts say that the pandemic also had an impact on maternal health. Talk to us about that. Break it down. How so?
Yeah. Well, first off, looking at the pandemic, we saw that there were racial disparities there as well. People of color, particularly Black and Hispanic people, were more likely to get COVID and then also to become seriously ill and even die from COVID-19. We saw the similar disparities sort of mirrored, for pregnant people. Black and Hispanic pregnant women were more likely to, get COVID and get sick from COVID. And so, that has had an impact on our maternal mortality rates. The CDC actually just released new maternal mortality rates for 2020, and we saw the maternal mortality rate among Hispanic women actually increase by 40% in the year 2020. And so that is definitely attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on that particular population. And we also continue to see those rates steadily increase among Black women.
Yeah, talk about those rates. What is the maternal mortality rate in this country on average, and how does the number change, Jamila, when you look at different demographics?
Well, I think it changes because, we, as I mentioned, there are disparities, right?
Yeah.
So, for Black women, they're about three times more likely to die of pregnancy-related causes. And then we also see those rates are mirrored when we look at comparisons between white women and Indigenous women. And, for a while, the United States, it took us a while to sort of actually have a real maternal mortality rate. For years, there were some challenges in terms of the counting. States did not have adequate measures in place to be counting maternal deaths. I think you can also see some differences along states in terms of how they're defining maternal deaths versus pregnancy-related deaths. And so for many years there was sort of like a patchwork in terms of measurement, and I think we're getting better at that. We have more funding that's going to support states for things like maternal mortality review committees, which are committees of largely health professionals, but then also in some states you have doulas and midwives that are also part of those bodies. Some states you even have patient advocates, those with lived experience when it comes to poor maternal health outcomes that are also a part of counting these deaths, and then also trying to make sense of, some of the particular circumstances that for moms who we have lost, what their experiences were in the pregnancy and birthing process.
Well, to that end, U.S. House members, they're looking to take action to change these rates. I'm thinking particularly of the Momnibus Act that was sponsored by Illinois Representative Lauren Underwood. I want to play a little clip of Representative Underwood talking about the importance of this legislation last summer.
When I think about the opportunity that we have to make a difference, when I think about the opportunity that we have to save lives, I think that in many respects, we're long overdue to take this action on maternal-related deaths, particularly in communities of color, because the majority of these deaths are preventable.
Tell us again what's included in the Momnibus Act, Jamila.
So the Momnibus Act is, the Black Maternal Health Momnibus is a comprehensive package. It actually includes 12 individual bills that address everything from maternal vaccinations to the social determinants of health, to the climate impacts on pregnancy, to data, another issue that we were talking about in terms of those maternal mortality rates, so ramping up funding and support to ensure adequate data measures across states when it comes to these issues. So it really is a comprehensive approach to addressing the maternal mortality crisis. And so the legislation has been so significant, not only in, I think, how we talk about Black maternal health in this country, but also as we conceptualize what we need in order to adequately address the issue.
Yeah. So it's still a bill now, but the Century Foundation created a tracker for that piece of legislation, right?
Yes, absolutely. It is still a bill. We have created a tracker, and it can be found on our website, tcf.org. And I will say, too, that, while we have the Black Maternal Health Momnibus Act, myself, along with other advocates in the field, also worked to include investments from the Momnibus and the Build Back Better Act that was passed in the House months ago. And we know that there are ongoing conversations about the next reconciliation package, both in the House and Senate, and we're working to maintain those investments in whatever iteration comes out of that chamber.
Yeah. And again, this is shrouded, of course, in a new light, right, with the fall of Roe v. Wade. So
yes.
Do you think that should reframe future conversations then of access to maternal health care, especially when it comes to women of color?
Well, those of us in the reproductive justice space have always talked about, the importance of maintaining and ensuring access to compassionate abortion care as part of the broader spectrum of reproductive justice, along with, maternal health as well. So for us, this is nothing new, right? But I do think that it is an important moment where we are hearing more decision makers recognize and talk about the connection between, what the fall of Roe is going to mean for our burgeoning, maternal health crisis in this country. It's certainly not going to help us better the situation for moms in this country when it comes to their maternal health when, access to abortion has been banned. And so it is certainly cause for alarm. And again, as we've mentioned throughout the program, that, both the ban on abortion as well as, some of the challenges we're seeing in terms of maternity care are going to fall hardest on Black women.
Jamila Taylor is the Director of Healthcare Reform and Senior Fellow at the Century Foundation. Thank you for joining us, Jamila.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll turn now to Dr. Candace Robinson, Medical Director of the Bureau for Maternal, Infant, Child, and Adolescent Health at the Chicago Department of Public Health. Welcome to Reset, Dr. Robinson.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So you've been listening along to the conversation here. Talk to us about the disparity in maternal mortality between Black and white Chicagoans. Where are the numbers right now?
Yeah, so we have actually looked at this data specific to Chicago, and in 2019, we produced a maternal mortality and morbidity report. And what we found is here in Chicago, our non-Hispanic Black women are 6 times more likely to die in either during or within that year after pregnancy than non-Hispanic white women here in Chicago.
You said 6 times more likely?
6 times more likely here in Chicago in that report. Yes. Yes.
What action was taken then to respond to that? That's a very striking statistic.
Yes, that is a striking statistic. And I think, in the time since that report is published, we've seen a lot of action in both here locally, but then I think we've also seen a lot of action at the state level, and we've seen things happening at the national level. First, I think we've seen a lot of attention given to this issue that we had not seen before. And I think that's been the first step towards making changes that can help with this issue. This issue is very complex, and there are a lot of factors that both factor into maternal mortality in general, but also into this very stark disparity that we see for our Black women versus white women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, what are the factors? What are the factors from what you've seen?
Yeah, I think there are multiple factors. Access to care is very important, certainly while pregnant, but also in that postpartum period. We know that, there are social determinants of health that are also a factor in health outcomes for women here in the U.S. Chronic conditions that are influenced by those social determinants of health as well. So there's a multifactorial process between care and social determinants of health. All of these things factor into these outcomes for women.
Last year, Illinois passed something called the 1115 waiver. Can you explain what that is?
Yes. So the 1115 waiver is a waiver that expanded postpartum Medicaid coverage for women. And this is really important. It actually took coverage from 60 days, which was the standard, to 12 months postpartum. And that really allows, a strengthening of that care for mothers, really aiming at allowing women to seek care in that time period postpartum. The Illinois actually did a maternal morbidity and mortality report, and they found that a third of pregnancy-related deaths occurred more than 2 months after pregnancy. So it's really important that mothers have access to care beyond those 60 days postpartum, and that's what this waiver allows. Mm-hmm. And I think it is also really important and aimed at reducing, those rates of maternal morbidity and mortality or illness and death, including those disparities that we see for Black women during this postpartum period.
Yeah, and last month, Mayor Lightfoot pledged $500,000 of city funds to keep Chicago a safe haven for abortion and reproductive care. What does that mean, Dr. Robinson, for the health inequities that we are talking about right now?
So those funds will, of course, go to support transportation, lodging, safe and necessary reproductive, obstetric and gynecologic care, and follow-up services. So we know that, here in Chicago and in Illinois, women will continue to have access to these reproductive services. And these funds will, of course, continue to be available and impact that availability of care.
What else are you all doing to narrow the gap in maternal mortality between Black and white Chicagoans?
Well, here in Chicago and the Chicago Department of Public Health, we have a program that called Family Connect Chicago. And our program now is in 4 pilot hospitals, but we're actually looking to expand this, and we're working to expand this to all of our birthing hospitals over the next year. This program provides in-home nurse visits for postpartum women to evaluate the physical health of the mom and the baby, but also to do a needs assessment for that mom and that family and connect them to resources. We know that this postpartum period is a very vulnerable time for moms, for their families, for their infants. And so this program seeks to really connect the mom and their family to the resources that they need during this very vulnerable period. So we're looking to have this program expanded to all 15 birthing hospitals here over the next year. This program also has a large community alignment piece where we work with the community, the organizations in the community to help provide those resources for families. And then I think it's important to note that there are a lot of partners working in this space. You know, there's a Chicago Collaborative on Maternal Health, Illinois Maternal Health Task Force, March of Dimes, and countless others who are working in this space, and many of them specifically focusing on communities where additional resources for maternal care are needed. And so, you know, Chicago Department of Public Health also sits at the table with these partners, helping to identify gaps and identifying ways to fill those gaps for maternal health needs.
Dr. Candace Robinson is a medical director at the Chicago Department of Public Health. CDPH is hosting an Instagram Live about Black maternal health tonight at 6. Dr. Robinson, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, you know, these events that keep coming up, instead of just reacting, dealing with them one at a time and being shocked each time we have another event that surfaces that is brought to our attention, we need to function from the position of an analysis that clarifies we are in a total system structure of racism, white supremacy, and that is why we are seeing the kinds of behaviors from individuals, be it Donald Sterling or be it George Zimmerman or any of the other cases that come to our attention. There is a reason that these cases exist. And I want to also talk about, in this case, they talked about mental health, but also gun control. And we have to begin to understand, I say you can't understand the gun mania if you don't understand racism, white supremacy. The gun is the answer to conscious and or subconscious, the answer, the response to the white collective feeling they can be genetically annihilated by black genetic material. And the gun is a great equalizer. I encourage everybody to get a copy of the ISIS papers and read.
So talk to me about this ruling from the Supreme Court, the impact of it. How momentous is it?
Well, I think it continues a trend that started in 2008 with the Supreme Court recognizing gun rights, the rights guaranteed in the Second Amendment, as a personal right, not a right connected to a well-regulated militia, as the first clause in the amendment states. That's a revolutionary decision in itself in 2008, and today's decision is just a furtherance of that, and it will be used in the future to knock down gun control laws across the United States.
So in essence, it's saying that this doesn't really have a bearing on the Second Amendment?
What it says is if there are two parts to the Second Amendment, which reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That first clause, a well-regulated militia, is now, and it has been since Heller was decided in 2008, largely perfunctory, not even read into the Constitution. Now the entire emphasis is on the second half of the amendment, and that right is a personal right, meaning that individuals cannot be restricted in their ability to protect themselves using a firearm.
So reasonably, I could bring my firearm into work?
Right, and so here comes the question. Like, I teach at a university that is a gun-free zone. Will those limitations where an individual is not allowed to bring a gun to our campus, will those be upheld? I have not had a chance to read all 135 pages of this ruling, but I have a feeling those type of limitations on place and limitations on which individuals are allowed to have a firearm are going to be under challenge in the future.
I know you just said you haven't read all 135 pages of the ruling, but is there anything else that stands out to you?
A couple points. One, this is another indication, and you're going to see another series of cases released tomorrow, and as one of cases released Tuesday. The country divide is growing and continues to grow between red states and blue states. And we see that on the Supreme Court. If you look at the difference between the majority opinion in this case written by conservative Clarence Thomas and the dissenting opinion written by the soon-to-be retired liberal justice Stephen Breyer, they are talking past each other. They're not even discussing really the same constitutional principles as each other. And that's an indication of our politics right now in the United States. And for the Supreme Court in specific and for our country in general, that's a very, very bad thing.
Anything else overall?
Let me just say one more thing, is why do we have so many important cases before the Supreme Court? And that's the result that we have a dysfunctional federal government. We have a federal government right now, at least since the last decade, that can't solve problems. We either have the Republicans or the Democrats denying either side any chance to pass legislation. And the way our system is set up by the Founding Fathers is it's designed to force compromise. And if compromise doesn't occur, the government can't act. So these types of issues, gun issues, religious rights issues, get forced into the courts, and then the courts, which is becoming more political, has to decide these issues, and that is clearly against the design of the Founding Fathers.
So what's the solution to this?
If I knew that answer, I would be writing books right now and be appearing on national television.
Last December, the U.S. Surgeon General issued a rare public advisory warning of a, quote, devastating mental health crisis among American teens. Symptoms of depression and anxiety for children and adolescents have doubled during the COVID-19 pandemic. But special correspondent Kat Wise reports on why accessing mental health treatment is so difficult for so many. And a warning, these next segments include explicit references to suicide.
My name is Chelsea. I'm with Youth Village's Mobile Crisis. I'm just going to ask you some questions, okay? No. Have you ever tried to hurt yourself?
Any self-harm like cutting, burning, or scratching?
For counselors at this youth crisis hotline in Knoxville, Tennessee, it's a busy morning during another busy week.
Is he on any medications?
The hotline averages more than 1,000 calls a month.
How often does this behavior occur?
It's run by Youth Villages, a nonprofit founded in 1986 that works with children who have serious emotional, mental, and behavioral health issues in 23 states.
I know Mom called us about some concerns. I just want to make sure that you're okay.
So have the homicidal threats been since all this happened, or was that prior?
Raquel Schutze is the organization's program director for crisis services in Tennessee.
This past fiscal year has been our highest volume on record.
What do you make of that?
Kids are hurting. Their families are struggling, and our community is having trouble meeting the need.
That need, which was already growing prior to the pandemic, is hitting families across the nation. 70% of U.S. counties don't have a child psychiatrist, and more than 60% of youth who report having severe major depression are not receiving any mental health treatment.
I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to call. When she tried to hurt herself, I took her to the hospital. It was all I knew to do.
Peggy Patrick has been caring for her 16-year-old granddaughter Jackie since she was a baby in the rural town of New Tazewell, Tennessee. She says around the age of 12, Jackie started changing from an outgoing and friendly child to withdrawn and often depressed.
I thought hormones, And I even told her that. Guess I tried to convince her that this was a phase.
Was there a moment you can recall when you thought that we need some help here? This is not, normal.
She started cutting herself. She attempted suicide. And when she would attempt suicide, of course, I'd take her to the hospital.
Jackie's story is unfortunately becoming more common nationwide. Emergency room visits for suspected suicide attempts are up 51% for adolescent girls since 2019, and 1 in 3 high school students report having persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness.
Has it been difficult to find mental health help for Jackie?
Good mental health, yes. It's been hard. I had a list of people that I thought would help her. A lot of them was too far away for us. We couldn't get there. A lot of them wouldn't take the insurance. I mean, you're helpless.
Over the last 4 years, the family struggled to find a consistent therapist for Jackie. Most were nearly an hour away by car. And treatment options in the area are limited for teenagers and often can be difficult to access. Jackie told us she once waited a month for a bed to open in a long-term inpatient facility. Nationally, the number of residential treatment facilities for youth has fallen by 30% since 2012.
I am a very bad overthinker. So I'm all the time thinking of worst scenarios that could go wrong and how things might just end badly in any way possible.
Jackie says she's speaking out about her mental health in hopes of helping other teenagers.
I mean, I was always bullied as a kid. I don't have many friends now as it is. I never got invited to do stuff with my friends. You know, even if they did consider me as a friend, I didn't get invited to go hang out that weekend or to go to the pool or to the park or anything like that. So I kind of had like a fear of missing out. And also there was always the stigma of like, you know, on TikTok and stuff like that, there's the pretty girl image. And I feel like that takes a toll on a lot of people.
Can you tell me about sort of what happened in those days?
Well, it either ended up in me self-harming or me trying to kill myself again. So, and those are very scary times.
How many times did you attempt suicide?
Probably about 4.
After her most recent attempt earlier this year, Jackie was connected to a Youth Village's crisis team. She was then placed into what's known as their Intercept program and paired with family intervention specialist Samantha Davis-Mize.
I'm going to let you be the driver on this one.
Okay, so for my calming jar, I think I want to make it my happy place.
Okay, so we've got a happy place.
Yes.
Okay.
Every day, Davis-Mize visits families like Jackie's across this sprawling section of East Tennessee.
Meeting Jackie for the first time and coming into the home and just sitting with her, she just looked like she had walked a long journey. She was tired and she was crying out for, hey, I need some help.
Youth Villages says the Intercept program works with about 11,000 families in more than a dozen states.
I had the psychoeducation on trauma and stress responses with the family.
The goal? To bring mental health services directly to the homes of families who need it most. These services include visits 3 times a week from specialists like Davis-Mize and regular consultations with not only at-risk youth, but also parents and guardians.
A lot of parents have never had to deal with this before. This is new.
Sydney Earle is a clinical supervisor for the Intercept program.
We work with a family in their home, right where they're comfortable, and identifying the root of whatever the problems may be and figuring out how to collaboratively solve those together.
One of the first steps for families, locking everything up in their homes that could be potentially dangerous.
So this is your lockbox?
Yeah. And this is, everything I need is all down in here. When I need to peel the potatoes or get a pair of scissors, or I have to unlock the box, and I have another one over there. It's got some stuff in it.
Peggy Patrick admits this initially felt a little bit invasive.
But it's worth it. It's worth it to keep your kids safe.
Let me just get this situated in our system, and then I'll get some information from you, okay? Is he currently safe right now?
Youth Villages funds its crisis hotline through the Tennessee Department of Mental Health. And for many families like Jackie's, these intensive in-home services are funded through the state's Medicaid program. Today, Jackie says the help has come at a crucial moment and that her mental health is now in a far better place.
Eventually, I gave myself the opportunity to say I want help. And I feel like I finally opened my eyes and said that I wanted something better for me, and I wanted a better life for me.
Jackie says she's also speaking out to help parents and guardians know how to talk to their kids about mental health.
I feel like every parent needs to listen to their kid extensively. I feel like a big question that needs to be asked is, are you really okay? Not, are you doing okay, or is there anything I can do for you? No, are you really okay? And I think that more parents need to have a sit-down conversation with their kid and make it known that they care and that they're there to listen.
Advice that now seems more urgent than ever. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Kat Wise in New Tazewell, Tennessee.
Ben and Sarah, an 11-year-old boy was biking around Deep River with his friend on Monday when they were confronted by a man and he pushed him off his bike. One of those first encounters with him happened on this sidewalk across the street from us. The family believes it was racially motivated, and they say that sixth grader is now afraid to leave his home.
Get the off your bike.
This video shows 11-year-old Deep River student Daniel Duncan pushed off his bike to the ground Monday. A prior video that day shows 48-year-old Jamison Chapman angrily confronting Duncan.
Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Connecticut? No, you didn't. So get the out of my town.
He asks the sixth grader where he grew up and to get out of his town.
Rage. I could not contain my anger.
Mom Desiree Dominique says she went into shock when shown the video and fears this type of behavior towards her children will continue.
I feel very upset. I feel anger. I feel sadness. I feel a sense of powerlessness.
She says this isn't the first time her kids have been targeted in Deep River. Her other son was shot with a pellet gun earlier this month, and she says they're verbally attacked at school.
The issue of racism is very prevalent in this area. I see it every day.
This happened just weeks after a message was left on a town sign with derogatory terms towards people of color. First Selectman Angus McDonald says it's unacceptable.
This is a safe place, and we are going to continue to work to make it more welcoming than it already is.
He says these actions do not represent the vast majority of Deep River.
This is something that we all need to address and should start at home.
Dominique says she encourages her children to stay positive and know they do belong in Deep River.
I remind them of who they are. I remind them that they are not their skin tone. I remind them that they are not their body.
The First Selectman says that they're planning public forums and workshops to address how to handle this type of inappropriate behavior here in Deep River. The mom says that these types of changes need to be made on an individual, a community, and a social level. Live in Deep River, Tony Black, Fox 61 News.
Okay, thank you, Tony. One quick question before you go. Do we know what happened before that incident? Do we have any clues about what led up to that confrontation?
Yeah, so Duncan, he told police, and this is according to the report that we got, that they were biking around and that Chapman had actually bumped into his friend and then started to raise his voice at them, and then obviously that led to what you saw in those videos.
Hitler had the supreme fascist state. And what was he worried about in Europe and in Germany? He was worried about white genetic annihilation.
A 101-year-old German man has become the oldest person ever found guilty of crimes linked to the Holocaust. Josef Schutz was convicted of being a guard at a concentration camp north of Berlin during the Nazi era. He had denied the charge, saying he spent most of the Second World War as a farm labourer. Journalist William Glucroft, who's based in Berlin, has been following the story.
Josef Schutz has been convicted of being a camp guard at the Sachsenhausen concentration camp. That's a concentration camp 60, 70 kilometers north of Berlin. It was mainly a labor camp, but it was many thousands of people died there. And Schutz has been convicted of assisting, knowingly, willingly assisting in those murders of camp inmates back during the war, during the Holocaust, between 1942 and 1945. He, of course, denied that he was involved at all. But there was ample evidence suggesting that he was indeed a camp guard at the Sachsenhausen concentration camp and participated in or was complicit in the murders of more than 3,500 people.
So how did he come to be arrested and charged?
Germany has a special office, a special prosecution office they've had for decades, pursuing Nazi criminals, pursuing criminals that perpetrated the Holocaust. For much of that time, it was pursuing high-level officers, high-level decision-makers. But as the years have gone on, as they've prosecuted more and more people, they've gone down the list, so to speak, and they've been going to camp guards, they've been going to assistants, they've been going to secretaries. In the last 10 years or so, you've seen several camp guards of various camps all around the concentration and death camp system, getting brought to court in their 90s, in their early 100s. And this prosecution office says it's going to leave no stone unturned. And until the very last Nazi has died and left this earth, they will continue prosecuting these cases.
And it's a 5-year sentence. Where will it be served? What actually will happen to him now?
That's unclear. He may ultimately not serve any of it. He was given a 5-year sentence, but that could be suspended. He also said that he will appeal. He's absolutely denying his involvement and his role in the concentration camp, in the Sachsenhausen concentration camp. And while on appeal, he may not serve that sentence. And we don't know how that appeal could go through, if at all. And we also don't know how long nature itself will allow him to be remaining on this earth. So he may very well die before, at 101 years old, it's very likely that he could die before he were even to serve any of it.
Is this the last of the Nazi trials? It sounded like there might be some more still to come.
People are getting on in years, and every time you think you've seen the last one, they seem to find one more person to put on trial.
That was William Glucroft in Berlin.
Lock her up. That's right. That's right. Lock her up. I'm going to tell you what. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
At 11 tonight, the family of Emmett Till wants authorities to make an arrest in his lynching that happened nearly 7 decades ago after a team discovered an unserved warrant in the basement of a Mississippi courthouse charging a white woman in his kidnapping. The warrant, dated August 29th of 1955, names Carolyn Bryant Donham as Mrs. Roy Bryant as the kidnapper. Emmett Till was abducted from a relative's home, killed and dumped into a river after Donham accused him of making improper advances to her in a store. A witness said the 14-year-old whistled at her. His accused killers were tried and acquitted, but admitted to the killing later in an interview. Donham is now in her 80s and most recently lived in North Carolina. The Till family is calling for her arrest. The district attorney's office that would oversee the case declined to comment on this story.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Saturday, July 2nd, 2022. So I have been told. This is our weekly compensatory call-in. Dial in if you have thoughts, observations, suggestions to share. The number 720-716-7300. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The number again, 720-716-7300. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Get my PSA in at the beginning and end. So as I have been told, this is a holiday weekend all the way through, I guess, Tuesday, I reckon. So my suggestion would be, as usual, sobriety would be best. If you got to hang out, the barbecue, whatever it's going to be, they're having a reunion of some sort, maybe, whatever, sobriety. Best way to go. You got to consume whatever it is. My suggestion would be get wherever this is going to be, wherever this event is being held, and you're there for the night. This is a relative's place or whatever it is. But I would not do any driving, being out and about, especially if this is in an area or you reside in an area with a high population of dark people. They will likely have sobriety checkpoints out perhaps all the way through next weekend. So I would be very mindful if you're going to go out and, participate in all of that. Think of that in advance. If I'm not going to be sober, which is best, hey, I am parking it for the evening. You do not want to be out on the road and then have to make, potentially life-saving decisions in a matter of seconds, and you've had a taste. We're still on the plantation. Racists do not take holidays. Anywho, compensatory call-in. Listener-supported counter-racist radio. Oh, man, I'm so disgruntled since it's the holiday. I do not do, plugs, advertisements for anybody, because we don't have friends and homies of the cows or anything like that. However, sleep is very important. I'm going to see if we can do some programs about that over the summertime. They just had a report, the New York Times, talking about evidence suggesting that not getting enough rest may have a long-term detrimental impact on health, particularly brain functioning. Proper sleep is so important. It's not, they were saying basically in the study that you can't, think the tacky phrasing, catch up on it. I'll catch up on it. They said, no, you don't catch up on rest. Not sleeping, especially over long term, studies may suggest can be very harmful to proper brain health. Get your rest. So all of that to say, having or investing in your bedding can be great for sleep. That was something that I was never like, let me go hang out in, Bed Bath and Beyond, and, get some new fluffy pillows. That was never Gus T. But I think it was after the flood or so, or just before. It was just before the flood. I said, man, I'm going to invest that I can have really comfortable bedding. It makes a huge difference. So I've had bamboo sheets on my bed for about 5 years or so. They are amazing. They are so soft. They literally get better with age. Every time you wash them, they get a little bit softer. They have effects beyond just being soft. For this time of year, in this part of the world, where it's summertime and hot, they are the best, or one of the best options. They have natural cooling properties to keep you from overheating at night, and they help to keep you warm when it's cold in the wintertime. I am a huge fan. I've had them, as I said, for 5 years. They're the best sheets ever. I do not like doing product plugs. However, I at least can say that this company, they did do right by me. Like the product that I got was damaged, and I ended up sending back. It was a long, cumbersome process, and they ended up giving me all of the products replaced for free. So they at least have done correct by Gus T. So they have many types of bamboo sheets. Cariloha, CARILOHA.com. CARILOHA.com. So they have bamboo bedding. They have like pajamas and all types of things, but bedding. The pajamas probably are nice too, but bedding, the bedding, sheets, their mattresses are probably good too. I haven't tried one of those yet, but maybe to come. But the sheets are amazing. The duvet and the duvet cover, amazing. Year-round, amazing. I had them for years now, and as I said, they just get better with age. They are kind of expensive. Bamboo sheets in general, bamboo bedding in general is expensive. They do have a lifetime warranty that they honor, so it is an investment in quality rest. In fact, they're so comfortable, literally, especially in the wintertime. Oh my gosh, they're so comfortable. You will not want to get out of bed. That's with the sheets and with the duvet cover. You will not want to get out of bed. It is that comfortable. And the sheets are so soft. I remember the flood happened, so I'd been sleeping on those for 6 months. flood happened, we got booted out, temporary flood housing. Those sheets felt like sandpaper. And I'm not even saying they were like, Walmart sheets or what have you. They may have been great or whatever, but they felt like total sandpaper. But they have a 30% sale for the so-called holiday weekend. I had told other Cows listeners about these sheets, and that if you catch them for the holiday, because I think that's when I got my set way back when it was so-called holiday weekend, so I took advantage of the big discount, so I didn't have to pay the huge sticker price. But they are well worth the investment. Caroloha.com. I'm so against product plugs, but this is for quality sleep. Quality sleep. Now, listener-supported counter-racist radio. Visit the blog racism-notes.blogspot.com. racism-notes.blogspot.com. PayPal button is in the top right corner. Directly beneath the PayPal button, you will see links for Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, the Cash App address, cash.app/$ the Cows. Enormous gratitude to all of the listeners who have nabbed an item or five over our 13 years. Hopefully we have been worthy of your time and energy. One thing I will say right there, I was going to say about my wish list, man, I went to Green Lake with my hammock for the first time today. I normally have been at Richmond Beach with my hammock, but I switched it up today, went to Green Lake and read and hung out with the ducks and ate cherries and blueberries galore while relaxing in my hammock at Green Lake. And then after I read there for hours, I switched and went to Richmond Beach, where I am now, to watch the sun and enjoy. Seattle is one of the few places that I know where you could sit at the lake, say, I'm bored, let's go to the beach. All right, and that's just driving to a different part of the city. Or even, I'm bored with this beach, let's go to a different beach. And then a different beach. You could do that for like the whole day, just kick it like an hour and a half at each beach. I think you could visit like 10 great locations throughout the Seattle area. Anyway, went to Richmond Beach to kick it. Everybody should get a hammock. They are so great. Like, it would encourage you to go out to hike if you have, great parks or beaches, lakes, all of the above in your area. Man, you can go read. You could just go sit and meditate. You could go take a nap. I did all of the above today. I started off, I sat, and I just looked at the ducks and the geese as they were kind of going by doing their thing. I said, all right, I have to read because we have a program tomorrow, so I have to be serious, have to read. So I sat down to read, and I did read for maybe 10 minutes. It's like, oh, man, I'm a little tired. Sleep, a little tired. Took a nap, dozed off, got a good 40-minute nap or so. I woke up, read for 2 hours and 10 minutes. Great at that point. I was all energized after I had my nap in. Woke up, the sun came out, got nice and warm, sat, looked at the water. I love Green Lake. And even with the hammock, they have codes for the hammock. Codify everything, right? That's what Fuller says. Codify the hammock. I noted, now I take note, now that I have mine, I take note of how other people have their hammock, how they secure it. Most of the code is about safety. Many codes are about safety. With the hammock, since you are suspended, it's, hey, let's make sure that if you do fall, you do not kill yourself. Crack your skull open. One of them is you're not supposed to have the hammock. Once you get in it, you should not be any higher than 45 centimeters from the ground. I noted a number of people have theirs higher than that. I think and it's even specific, like they have a code about the optimal angle for the line that's securing the hammock, the optimal angle between that line and the tree or whatever post it is that you're using to anchor. and just to have more tension in the line. That's something I noticed as well. Like if you just put it up in any old kind of way, it won't have a lot of support where you can really be in it and be comfortable and relax. Like they have codes about everything, how to make sure that you don't get cold while you're in it and to make sure that you have the most comfort. It is amazing. I even added on to make sure that you don't lose any of the carboners that you need to secure it to make sure it's in place. Codify everything. And safety, again, safety is at the core of most of the codes for the hammock, so you don't, kill yourself while you're relaxing at the beach or lake or wherever you happen to be. Anyway, love my hammock. Cannot encourage it enough. It supports enough weight. You could have multiple people in your hammock, go out and do some reading or what have you while the weather is nice. Get your sunshine and vitamin D in. In fact, I can even give you a quick story. I was at Richmond Beach. This was a couple days ago. Black male came and sat next to me, which is always like, could be, problem. But he was just really happy that it was sunny because it's been like the coldest summer ever, coldest spring ever, worst weather in a 12-month period since I've been in Seattle. But this day it was warm. I think it was like 70, 75, 78 degrees, like warmest day of the calendar year, I think, so far, pretty easily, 78 degrees. So he's sitting out and he says, man, I love it. So warm, like we're black, we need the sun, get that vitamin D in, and blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking, okay, he's constructive so far. I hope he doesn't say too much more. And I think, I was reading too. I wasn't just sitting, hanging out. I was actually trying to read programs to prepare for it. So he sits down and he says, man, it's been so cold, and it has been. It's been so cold and rainy and cloudy. It's been no sun. Like, I actually wished for a heat wave. And I said, were you here last year, this time, when we had that 110-degree day and the heat wave that lasted 3 days? He said, yes, I was here. I did not like that. He was so definitive about it. I was like, yeah, because I would not wish for that at all. Like, I wouldn't care if it stayed cold the entire summer. Like, I could deal with that, because I had even thought of that before he said it. Like, when I was complaining myself about the cold weather here, and I said, well, this time last year it was 110 degrees, so what would you rather take? And at first I was kind of thinking, well, it was, and I said, oh yeah, that was the deadliest weather event in the history of Washington State. We have active volcanoes here, earthquakes. That was the deadliest weather event. So, drunk logic. You don't need any sense. You do not want the heat wave. Words are important, which he immediately recognized. Anywho, hammocks are amazing. Wish list. I no longer have a hammock there because I'm enjoying it. But other items are there. Gus T. Renegade at Amazon.com. Much obliged for the folks who have nabbed an item or three. You should get yourself a hammock. If you do not have one, they're so light. You could toss it in the trunk of your vehicle or backpack or wherever. They're so light and portable, and it will really encourage you to get out and enjoy. Alrighty, so I've pitched two products. Next, so we will be here tomorrow, back to white guests only, thank goodness, even though Dr. Dobson was pretty constructive. Even some listeners said so as well. Our guest for tomorrow, Dr. Neil Krause, white man. He wrote a book about racism in Buffalo. It's called Race, Neighborhoods, and Community Power, Buffalo Politics, 1934 to 1997. Racism is every page. All this book is about. They won't allow black people to move to this part of Buffalo. Rick James and his family, they won't allow them to move to this part of Buffalo. They won't allow them to get jobs. Just everything is racism, white supremacy at every turn in the book. I gave you the years, 1934 to 1997. As soon as I got this book, the first thing I did was turn to the index. Does he mention the .22 caliber killer Joseph G. Christopher? No. How on earth do you write a book about racism, white supremacy in Buffalo, New York from 1934 to 1997 and not have at least one paragraph about, oh yeah, that white guy who grew up here, whose dad was upset about him riding the bus to the integrated schools and killed all those black people here, carved out 2 of their hearts and everything, had a march, 5,000 people downtown. Jesse Jackson came to town. The president is talking about this. A federal task force, part of a House subcommittee, House Select subcommittee, same type of thing that they're having now about January 6th. They had about Atlanta, Buffalo. How do you not include it one paragraph about, oh yeah, that was a big part of Buffalo history and racism, white supremacy? That will be one enormous question. And I mean, like, if this was grading, academic setting, I've been thinking like that's either a 2-letter grade deduction automatically, like it could be flawless, best thing ever, no mention of Joseph Christopher. Either that's a 2-letter grade deduction or an automatic F. I'm going to have to ask him that tomorrow too, because I mean, Jesus Christ, man, like, are you serious? 5,000 people. He does mention Cynthia Wiggins, super important. I will give a quick snippet on Cynthia Wiggins just because I think this is important. I didn't know who Cynthia Wiggins was before I read the first part of his book. He even starts, like, the first paragraph of the book is Cynthia Wiggins. So this is from the Globe and Mail, living on the frayed edges of urban racism. See those metaphors? The frayed edges. What does that mean? Some people love the edge city. Others revile it. All sides agree, however, that this coarse-grained landscape of house farms, office parks, and mini-malls is unfinished. It needs history, and it needs monuments to make the accretion of its stories visible. Cheektowaga, New York is a classic edge city that has prospered despite the obvious debility of Buffalo, the mother city it borders, and because of the traffic accident. These are not accidents. We talked about that word before. And because of the traffic accident that killed Cynthia Wiggins of Buffalo, it now has a story worthy of a monument. Cynthia Wiggins was struck and killed by a dump truck on December 14 while crossing Walden Avenue on her way to work at the Walden Galleria Mall in Cheektowaga. She was 17, a single mother, black, and she worked in the food court. She commuted across the color and class bar that separates downtown Buffalo from its suburbs on the number 6 bus of the Niagara Frontier Transportation Authority. But the number 6 bus doesn't stop at the Walden Galleria. Transit officials, whites, had proposed such a stop in 1988, but they say that the mall's owner, Pyramid Kaz of Syracuse, New York, flatly refused to accommodate it. Pyramid was willing to provide stops for buses from nearby suburbs, but specifically ruled out a stop from the bus from Buffalo's Sycamore Street, that intersects with Jefferson, where the shooting took place. So Cynthia Wiggins and so many like her, the mainly black Buffaloians who worked McJobs at the mall, disembarked on the far side of 7-lane Walden Avenue, crossed without the aid of sidewalks or a traffic light, and walked 275 meters through a parking lot to work. She was hit by a dump truck, but no one in Buffalo is fooled about the real cause of her death. This is a divided city metaphor whose suburbs refuse to welcome an extension of the inner city's light rail system. I've heard that before, where barroom talk refers to the proposal as the Burglar Express. As many local leaders recognized immediately, Cynthia Wiggins was killed by racism. Make it plain. I will stop there, but that's how the book does start, so I think that is important. But man, how do you not mention Joseph G. Christopher? We'll be here tomorrow with that and many other questions. The history of white supremacy, racism in Buffalo. And again, how all of this, and I mean thoroughly, explains how a white race soldier could easily predict where the Negroes will be in Buffalo. Lots of deliberate white planning went into that over decades. Let's see. Before we get to the listeners, anything I will touch on? There are many things. I took many notes. We'll get to the callers. The only thing I will touch on, that segment about cryptocurrency and black people. If you don't understand white supremacy, racism, what it is, how it works, everything else will confuse you. Many aspects of that report. Adrian Ma, I believe, is a white male hosting the report. He says, when he talks about all the different types, so-called redlining, and he talks about the predatory loans that were made to black people in the 2000s and then wiped out lots of their income and what have you for black people, non-white people. And he says, then on top of it all, add the microaggressions, or in some cases, the uber aggressions a lot of black customers have faced while banking. I don't even know what that means. I was like, do you mean like being mistreated while doing a ride share, or what? What are you talking about? Do you mean going to the bank and they have a code where they say we don't make loans to niggers? Is that what you do? Or are you talking about the one where you go to the bank and they say, oh, well, this nigger says that he has a check and he's holding the check and he has identification, but I mean, it's a nigger, so I mean, he could have stolen it from anybody, stolen the fingerprints and all. So we're going to have to get a blood sample and urine sample and genetic material from his grandmother and a few other pieces of identification before we even think about it. Is that what you're talking about? Is that an uber aggression? Words. And then it continues. So then they have Tanya Evans. I'm just going to read exactly from the transcript what was said. Now, again, one moron consistently says these metaphors are an enormous problem. It should be about specifics and details, especially now. We're talking about cryptocurrency. Unregulated. New form of financing. Details. What are you talking about? Don't mystify me. Tanya Evans, directly from the transcript, she says, even as a black queer woman in this space, what opportunities can we have if we lean into the language of the future of money question? And that's what I think this space presents the opportunity for us to do as black Americans who are going to move the needle and hopefully stay ahead of the curve. Now, this is a law professor at Penn State. Right on, Jerry Sandusky. One, anytime somebody, like the first thing you're coming to talk to me about anything, fire safety, swim lessons, maternal health, breastfeeding, cryptocurrency, drones, anything, the first thing out of your mouth. Now, I got to let you know that I am about some queer LGBTQ. We can almost fade that. I mean, really. I listened, obviously. I read the transcript, but I mean, really. Why is that got to be at the front of the conversation? I thought we were talking about what does that have to do with cryptocurrency? Even if you were so-called straight, what does that have to do with cryptocurrency? I thought we were talking, how did we end up talking about sex? We were supposed to be talking about cryptocurrency. That's what we said. That alone, already, the suspicion, man, you were thinking about an investment. If this is the pitch, you already lost it. No thanks. You might as well get to the refreshments. Where's the lemonade at? They got any water? Now, then we get to the rest of it. You're coming and talking to black people serious. It should not be all this jargon. Move the needle. Lean in. Ahead of the curve. Come on, man. It should be about details and specifics about why this is constructive. Even when they talk to Samson Williams, now this is a black male they started with at the beginning, said the white guy on the job told him, hey, get on LinkedIn, get good socks. I don't know how that translated to Hello Kitty. And then get yourself some cryptocurrency. And he said he, didn't mess it up. I guess he made a little bit of money, but then he sold his stock for the most part, got out of it, said, hey, he didn't say this is going to help us end racism. He said, is this going to help us end unchecked capitalism? If you don't understand white supremacy racism, the problem is not unchecked capitalism. The reason that he said, hey, even with the cryptocurrency, I sold most of what I had, got out of it, made a few bucks, but I'm still a black male. Now, he said a black male in America. It would still be the same if you were a black male in Johannesburg, a black male in Paris, a black male in Italy, a black male in Belgium, China, wherever. It would just be a nigger, either with a few more nickels, a few less nickels. Why is that? Is that because of unchecked capitalism? No. That's because of the system of white supremacy racism. Words are very important. Now, I did do a product plug for the Carol Aloha sheets. Now, Hello Kitty socks might be the best thing ever. I've never had any, so if people know, like Gus T, do not, be out here acting like you don't want to support Hello Kitty socks. They're the best thing ever. You can correct me on that. But in fact, what I thought was I've basically seen lots of females, so-called Asian females, frequently wearing Hello Kitty paraphernalia, but maybe I'm confused. Anyway, I just read move the needle. We're talking about finances now, ahead of the curve. Specifics, words are very important. Race soldiers love this sort of jargon. If we're going to use these type of metaphors, oh man, we're going to stay ahead of the curve. We're going to include some diversity. We're going to move the needle. We're going to make progress and hope. We are going to bridge the racial divide. They love it. They will keep you confused, and we'll have this problem for another 10,000 years. Details and specifics. Non-white people, we have been encouraged to talk like this for, centuries. We are still learning, Gus T included, so sometimes we don't have logic to articulate our views. Always best. Be as accurate, as precise as you can with words. For all of the COWS programs, so we could avoid metaphors, much obliged. Again, I reserve the right to immediately call attention to those metaphors. We should be thinking about what we're saying. That is an extremely important component of attempted counter-racism science. The number again, 720-716-7300. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Just that segment where they were talking about the black family attempted in Maryland, where they said we're like the Black Brady Bunch. I prefaced that segment with Jamie Foxx singing the theme song to the Brady Bunch. Metaphor, because he said simile specifically, we're like the Black Brady Bunch. That is another component to those metaphors. Frequently, invariably, the metaphors are also conveying values of white supremacy. You are not the Black Brady, but some fictitious white family. They didn't even have a Negro butler on the show, unless my memory is bad. You are not the Black Brady Bunch. And why is that your reference for what your black attempted family is? A white family that's not even real on a television. It's not even a family, a white television show. White is the value, is the reference point for everything. And those metaphors are already, that's the way we think. That's the way that I think about our so-called family, where we both have these children, not biologically ours. Oh, yes, the Brady Bunch. And then it continued, because he started very beginning with like the Black Brady Bunch. He continued, said when his daughter came back home, no big deal. Financial crisis, system of white supremacy, whatever. But he said, hey, I was working on my man cave in the basement, had my 100-inch television. I just said, they tell you, make sure you don't have that hammock more than 45 centimeters from the ground. He has a 100-inch television. Now, man, you thought the Brady Bunch had an impact on you before when it came out in the 70s on your little rinky-dink black and white television with the antenna on a 13-inch. Man, when Dylan Roof is on your screen at 100 inches, Matt Damon is on your screen at 100 inches. Whew. When you don't, and at 100 inches now, even for a so-called adult black person, that is an extraordinary amount of poison. Brain trashing. Can you imagine a 4-year-old and they have a 100-inch television in their residence? I'm pretty sure he hadn't seen the television show The Brady Bunch in years, probably since he was a child. So that means decades later, this is his reference point for at least a certain type of family. That is the end. I said, that's the impact of seeing a show on probably a 13-inch black and white screen, nothing comparable to an HD, probably 4K, 100-inch screen. Get to see Peyton Gendron in high definition for the trial. Precious in Between, Big Mama's House. Reading is more important than watching television. Folks who dialed in with a hand up, proceed.
Good evening. May I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Good evening, and thank you to the host, and good evening to the participants of the CALS program. I'd like to start my comments on the Idaho arrest of the white supremacist militia. I'm not sure if they're just gun owners or they're suspected terrorists. But one of the comments was made that those people are promoting gun ownership or gun violence in ways that are objectionable to how the LGBTQP operate. It seems to me that when I observe how those groups promote, one is perhaps more subtle, uses different mediums such as television, radio, to promote their ideals, whereas the other group perhaps uses a slightly different medium, such as the internet, to gather recruits. But the goal is still to dominate non-white people. That's my observation. And the segment about the women who have childbirth issues where they may die or suffer ill health effects. I think that's a very serious topic, and one that would necessitate a logical, deep thought and thorough examination. But I am a bit confused when they bring up compassionate abortion or Roe versus Wade in relation to women receiving more positive outcomes due to childbirth. It seems as if that is intermingled with that conversation inappropriately, or it is not thoroughly examined why that is brought up within that conversation. Maybe I don't have a fuller understanding of it, and that's very likely true. But I suspect that is promoted to black women more than it is to not to white women. And one last comment on the segments was the book Countdown is very relevant to the reproductive health of men and women. It would be logical to examine the health effects of lifestyle, how you your diet, the things that are around you, the environmental negative impact on reproductive health, in addition to the way that it's currently being discussed. And one last thing is that I have taken a suggestion that was made by one of the participants of the program who drives for a living to utilize the hot logic. I'm not promoting this specific product, but it has been very helpful in my profession driving. I'm able to bring along food and put it in my into the charging device, and it heats the food up quite well. And I am very appreciative of that advice, because I probably would not have come across that otherwise if I had not been listening to the COW's content. Thank you, and that's all I have to share for the evening.
Man, she'd be getting sponsorships, right? Like all the product placement in one program. My goodness. Neutralizing workplace racism every Friday. We talked about that. And those, because they have lots of those type of portable devices that can heat your food, and little portable mini refrigerators where you can have it all. Have, really be gourmet and have all of your food. But just talking about that so that you don't have to eat out. You can minimize that if you're someone who does a lot of driving for a living. We a good number of listeners who do that. You don't have to be eating out and giving racists opportunities to put things in our plate, in our mouth. So absolutely, that way you can, and that encourages you can do some of your own cooking. Prepare some healthy meals, lots of fresh fruits, vegetables, take whatever you want, bam, have a nice, healthy, home-cooked meal at your leisure, and greatly minimize all those chances for race soldiers to poison a Taco Bell. We were talking about that before. No Taco Bell needed. Got my meal right here. Love it. As for the segment that we're talking about, maternal health, I think sometimes that gets branded under the genre of reproductive health and or reproductive rights. So I could see where they might put that. And in a system of white supremacy, conflation is so prominent. I can also see, hey, let's see if we can get these victims of white supremacy, as opposed to thinking about this as an issue of racism, let's think about this as an issue of sexism. And I mean, that is true in terms of the poor outcomes for females in general. Even many white women, they have poor maternal health for childbearing ladies in this part of the world, period. But it's substantially worse for black females. But to get them to think of this as a sexism issue, as a women's rights issue, reproductive health, as opposed to this is another component of white supremacy racism. And I thought of the book Countdown as well for totally different reasons. I played that segment. I know we have some cows listeners. There are a number of black people who say, I think all of this is propaganda. I don't think any of these statistics about black mothers dying in childbirth at, I think they said 3-to-1 ratio to white women. I don't think that's true. I think all of this is just racist propaganda and lies to scare black females to not have children, or to be unnecessarily paranoid and fearful through the process that, oh man, something, catastrophic is going to happen, and oh, it's going to be awful, and, all the rest of it. I do not think that is the case. I have not heard that from anyone who is a medical professional, by the way. It's just been other folks who are listeners. No one who is a medical professional. That's not my view. And I remembered the book Countdown, not to mention Medical Apartheid, among many others, but Countdown, like, just based on that alone and the environment where racists warehouse black people and the food, Tops grocery store, which they said is like a big 7-Eleven, there's absolutely zero evidence that would lead me to think that that is wrong. And I don't exactly look at black males and black females of a childbearing age and see lots of folks saying, ooh, we can't go out here and be reckless with procreating because it could be really dangerous. I'm a black female and I could die. I don't see that on a widespread basis. Now, maybe I'm up here in the Pacific Northwest. Maybe I'm not around enough black females, but I do not see that on a widespread basis at all. Please set me straight if I'm in error. Email is untiljustice@gmail.com. Archive, catch me if you hear it. Archive, you can let us know right now, *61, if you are seeing things differently in your part of the world. Last one thing, and then we'll get our other folks, Bay Area Mom and other people. In Idaho, where they brought up all the LGBTQ, all the rest of it, individuals being attacked. No one should be mistreated, system of justice. But lots of racial narrowing. We talked about that before, and making it just seem like these small number of white people who they are calling far right, right-wingers, extremists, that they are the racists and not the rest of us. See, the good white people, we drove them out of this area. And you even heard in the report where they said it seemed like a good number of people are like, nah, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case either. What does it mean to be white? That's just a small subset, a minority, if you will, of the white race at large, the so-called extremists and National Front, Proud Boys, the Boogaloo, all the rest of it, KKK. And again, that's my area, Idaho, that's Gus's neighbors. I've been to Idaho before, right next door. Montana, I said that, the Pacific Northwest, that is Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Washington State, Alaska, and a little bit of Canada. We have listeners in Alaska, like plural. I didn't even know. I thought we just had like one or two, like one called in, and then other folks were investing in everything. From Alaska, stunned. See if we can get up there to visit. That's one. I have not been to the state of Alaska, but this whole region, prominent, lots rife for study. Like myself, Gus T, I need to know more about Idaho and all of that, because that has long been talked about, this region as a haven for white supremacist efforts. They're supposed to make this like a white homeland where they can keep all the non-white people. Oregon, that was in the state constitution. Let's see. Other folks who dialed in with a hand up, *61. Line should be open.
Can I be heard?
Bay Area Mom. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you for taking my call. Greetings to you and everyone on the line. Okay. So, childbirth, Black women having high rates of death during childbirth. That does happen to us for a lot of reasons. A lot of times we don't know because we're not paying attention. We don't know we're pregnant, so that means we're not getting adequate prenatal care, and we're still reckless, doing whatever, eating incorrectly a lot of times, drinking, smoking, drugs, stress, environment, pollution. So we do have a lot of deaths with either us or the baby. And the what do they call it? Sudden infant death. We have that as well. And that's not a hoax. That's actual. And they don't have to make that up to keep us from to scare us into not having children. That's the actual truth to me. And I don't know a lot of medical stuff, but I've lived a little bit, and I've known a couple of people, or two or three, and they've had those issues. All the Black farmers waiting on I forgot that is a cute little name for her farm, but she was waiting on some kind of funding from the government, and hopefully, I was just thinking, I just hope she's able to get it in a timely fashion, because she's been waiting for a while, and it's a shame how it's complicated for us to be able to maintain our land, especially farmland, and particularly farmland, because they're trying to buy it up from everybody, especially Black people. So I hope she's able to pass it on. I hope whomever she passes it to, they're really interested in having that land and utilizing it and fighting for it versus maybe selling it when they did it, if they did it. There was a lady, Carolyn, is that her, Carolyn Bryant? The lady, Emmett touched her hand when he gave her the money, and then that's why she caused all that commotion, and he ended up dying, getting killed. I wonder about that, the Emmett Till law, because it doesn't seem like I think they're waiting on a Black person to use that on. They're not going to bother Carolyn Bryant. They're not going to bother that lady. Stay tuned for that. The parks and the playgrounds for children, and how they, like, the low-income areas don't have any adequate parks. So I would take my child to the park. Well, he's not a child. I used to take my son to the park a lot. My daughter too. Throughout the years they have declined. It's hard to find a decent park. Even when my son was little, I couldn't take him to any of the Oakland parks. I would have to go to the hills, and because there's no, and even the zoos support animals. So the Oakland Park Zoo, it's not suitable. It's not as suitable as maybe in the wider neighborhoods. So for the children not to have any where to play, that's low income, that's close, that's sad, because there's nothing really to do. You're just in the street or you're in the house. And if no one can, take them out to go to the park, they do lose out on that kind of activity. And then all the hangout, like in the poor parks, that's where all the people hang out, and out with the homelessness sleepiness. Well, at least in my part of California, they sleeping at the park, and it's like you in their way. So excuse me, Lauren, you can't swing. He's there. So, yeah, hopefully. Well, too bad. So anyway, the suicide attempts with the high school students, and the depression, and them feeling just helpless, and the therapy, if they even think to get therapy, how far it is, and then if they need to stay, there's no beds available. You have to wait, and will my medical cover it? And then you don't even know. You're not paying attention to the children being depressed or looking depressed. So I guess I understand why the girl said, just really ask, are we okay? Just super ask. Make sure you know that we're okay. So I remember during the pandemic, I was on a Zoom with the kids just to see, just random Zoom checking on the kids. And one of the little girls who lived in Sacramento, she was saying that she was self-harming herself. And nobody knew. I think her cousin was the host of the meeting, and she didn't even know the girl was doing all this stuff. Her dad had just died. So they have these depressions, and we do have to look back and look out for the children because we don't know how they're handling anything, stress, and they're so logged into these gadgets, the computers and so forth, that you don't even know the video programming that they're receiving on all the screen time that they get, because our children get a slew of screen time, and a lot of the screen time is depressing, and it has you responding strangely to situations. So it is true, it is sad, and I hope the adults will look out for the children because they are depressed. Even in middle school, they're depressed and considering suicide. And I had a kid draw a picture of somebody. She's hanging. It's in one of the assignments in her journal, and with her writing, she has. I don't know if she was tired of writing. It was towards the last day of school, and she had. I'm just asking out of the blue because I want to know. Like, so what is this? A ladder? Just right over her, around her neck. Is it because it was mine? And she said, "No, it's around." Oh, okay. So the little girl, she drew a picture of one of her little characters hanging from a rope on her classwork, and so nobody takes it serious until something happens. So I just wish the parents would look more, just everybody, all adults, just check on the children because sometimes they hold it within themselves, whatever they are going through, and it may not be a big deal to whomever, but it's a big deal to the children. And thank you for taking my call. I'll mute my line.
Much obliged, Bay Area mom. Before we nab some of the other folks who dialed in, I thought the portion about the playgrounds was really important as well. Not that any of it was unimportant, but getting outside, all that talk about the hammock and what have you, is so important for mental health. Exercise, socializing directly. They're talking about that. So many, as she said, so many of the younger children are just gadgets, and especially the last 2 years with Zoom, everything. Like, do you have the ability to put that phone down, step away from that screen, and actually talk to a person? and saying that you have folks who can't even do that now because all their communication is, texting away and zooming it up and all that, like actually talking to someone. Wow, that's crazy. Who does? Like, get outside, hand-eye coordination, all of that. Get some vitamin D, as the fellow was telling me at the park. Like, so many, man, out just right here in Seattle at Richmond Beach. Man, you will see they will have the white people out with their drones, hammocks, paddle boats, fishing, exercises. I mean, just everything outside. And then the racism, of course, but I mean, all of that, knowing, oh, yes, so good to get outside, get your children outside doing all of that. And then they said for the black children, you can't even get monkey bars. Can't even get a swing set. Anyway, and then that directly right there, being online, you don't get to go outside, don't get any fresh air, don't get any sunshine, get to interact with people directly, just inside, watching that 100-inch screen. And then all the depression, especially, as I said, the last 2 years, so many folks missed out on milestones where they couldn't go to this graduation, couldn't do that. University of Washington, they just had graduation for the last 3 years. Now that's, people that are 21, whatever it is. I'm sure for a lot of them, that was traumatic to not be able to go through, that rites of passage, as they call it, and have your family and all that there and pictures and all that. For 15-year-olds, 12-year-olds and all that, to miss out, graduating middle school or going to high school or whatever, graduating high school, whatever, and to miss all of that and all the things that, have been sacrificed, like check on your children. All of that, in addition to the system of white supremacy, frequently ask questions. See how that reminded me of Seven Bridges. 10-year-old black child commits suicide, as she said, happening with very young children where they're depressed and all of this. 10 years old and Seven Bridges commits suicide. Racism right there. Let's see. The number is 720-716-7300. The code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Other folks who dialed in with a hand up, line should be open.
It's much appreciated. As always, very strong material. I wasn't able to peep the entire broadcast, but it was very thorough as usual, so shouts to that. I did want to ask about this question of self-harm and its connections with white supremacism, and if there were any texts or other work that you or the community or I should say the Cow's family are aware of as far as the link between white supremacism and self-harm, because that segment struck me in particular. I was reminded of the work by Malcolm Gladwell, where he discusses links between, self-harm as a kind of contagion, and as I recall, that was focused in Micronesia, which, as far as I know, is primarily non-white, as far as its population is concerned. But just very interested in this question of the links between self-harm and white supremacism, and also just thought that it was telling in the discussion around this 101-year-old participant in the the murder and genocide of, I think they stated the number at 3,500 people. I don't recall their name, but I thought it was telling that they used the term the metaphorical term "no stone unturned," which is applied in certain instances with regard to investigations or et cetera, and it seems in many other instances that type of metaphor is not used when it comes to questions of the pursuit of justice or the pursuit of the clarity about what occurred in those kinds of heinous crimes or those kinds of heinous activities, better said. But so either way, just greatly appreciated as always, and this is a key space and platform for the discussion of all of these issues. Before I go, I did also just I found myself wondering, how was it again that you came across the work around and the occurrences as far as Joseph Christopher? Because I recalled that being discussed during the book club, but I can't recall right now what specifically led to it, and I just find that nobody that I'm in contact with seems to have any knowledge or memory of these occurrences. Much appreciated. Peace, everyone.
Yes, sir. Much obliged. We are not a family, just listeners. Let's see. I am not familiar, to be truthful. The person who would have been really good to ask, Grandcestor Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, but just like asking me, I'm not really familiar in terms of resources connecting or investigating racism, white supremacy, and self-harm. Now, just as you mentioned it, I started looking, and they do have reports that look at this. Looking at one right now: discrimination and suicidality amongst racial and ethnic minorities in the United States. I did see one quickly for some other parts of the world as well, but they do have studies. Look, and this is more recent. This is, I think, 2018, 2020, even more recent. But they do have studies that look at that. Maybe we can talk to some of these folks, check out. This is another reason. Go to the university libraries, community colleges, because you could just do a search for self-harm African Americans, self-harm race, self-harm racism, suicide, whatever. Pick different keywords and just see what you get. And they'll probably have quite a few reports. As I said, if you go to the university library, college library, you can download that report. You can take it as a PDF right there, read it at your leisure. You find the author, get their email address, ask them a few questions. A lot of times these folks will respond, see if they have more current work that they might be able to send you or direct you to, or whatever it is. Even a lot of times community colleges, you'll be able to get access to this information. But I'm not knowledgeable immediately. If there are any listeners, feel free. Let me know if you find information. Let me know. I'll do some digging and or investigating, see if I can find something in my research. In terms of Joseph G. Christopher, I knew about that case just a small amount of detail because of the so-called Atlanta child murders. That was a case that I was much more familiar with, and that's something that has stood out to me significantly in researching all of this over the past month and a half or so. Those two cases were talked about together. They happened concurrently. There are more reports than you could read where they talk about Atlanta, Buffalo. The House Select Committee investigated Atlanta, Buffalo, many other cities. Racism, white supremacy. 1980. Go read that in the paper, what they were talking about. But so I had read many books about the Atlanta child murders. The List by Chet Dettlinger, he investigated, not with the police, privately investigated the murders, wrote a book about it, co-authored, and he mentions the Buffalo killings in that book, and I remembered it. Chet Dettlinger was the first guest on the Cows when we came back on the air February 2009. But I remembered, and then even as we've been doing all of this, I also read The Atlanta Youth Murders and the Politics of Race. That book also mentions the Buffalo killings. I talked about a letter grade deduction. It is an automatic letter grade deduction, if not outright F, if you're talking about the Atlanta child murders and you don't mention Buffalo. These cases happened at the same time. They have so many news reports of Buffalo officials going back to Atlanta. People suspected is the same person doing both of these killings in Atlanta and Buffalo. I mean, for me, it's baffling and disgraceful that people talk about Atlanta, or at least they know a little bit about that case. Nothing about Buffalo. Context totally eroded. It just shows the incredible success and precision that racists, where they can totally erase an event like this from a collective memory where people don't remember it, no details, no nothing about this, not even a connection to other cases that happened at the same time, nothing. But that's how I know about it. Reading, again, more important than watching television. It's mentioned in 2 different books that I had read, and an author that I interviewed about the Atlanta child murders, as it should be. It shouldn't be able to talk about that case without mentioning Buffalo and vice versa. Let's see. And that's why the sequencing, I've talked about that for years. Deliberate. That's why I put that segment on the Nazis. They can go and drag these Nazi race soldiers out of their wheelchair at 101 years old, hold them accountable for their crimes. You can do the same thing with Carolyn Bryant Donham and the rest of these racists. They could go through all these lynching pictures and get out their facial recognition technology, identify and get the arrest in. That's not what we have. Let's see. Other folks who dialed in with the hand up, our caller in Florida. Anybody else, make sure you do not wait until the last minute if you have commentary to share.
May I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Greetings to Gus, the host, the listeners and callers. Just a few things I'd like to share is from the audio segment. I did notice on the segment where they were talking about Idaho. I do remember seeing that report about, I think they were mentioning that, about the racist suspects that were arrested in that area. I did notice that they were wearing the white mask and everything when I saw that report. But I noticed they used that term conservative haven or something like that. I would really like to hear what that person meant by that, just giving their own explanation. And it looks like they were getting into an exchange, like where it was becoming into, I guess, like an argument or something, where I think the term war was being used and saying that we have to get our guns or something, and I'm glad that, and I appreciate you use the Dr. Wilson audio to, to put it in the context of what's about to be shown in the audio, because, she was, I think that's what, maybe that was the reporter or something. She was like, who are you up against? Or who are you at war with, and things like that. And I think one of the people mentioned Antifa or something. I guess that's supposed to be the so-called far left people or something, organization. And then you have the far right. Like, it don't seem like they're giving definitions or explanations for that. And like you mentioned, like they are trying to say, these are the only races. That's what the message is. That's the message it seems like is being put into what they're saying is that this is what a racist is. Like, this is white supremacy or domestic terrorism. I think that's a term that's used. And the segment where I think the young black child was in the neighborhood, toward the end, it was an interesting comment made as well, where it was a female, I don't know if it was a white female, black female, said that, you know, I try to tell them or tell him all the time that you are not your body or something like that. You are not your body. You are not your skin color or something. So I was processing that as well. And where the lady opened up I guess what she was talking about, the disparity maybe in the Chicago area, I think, about, she said non-white Hispanic or black, or non-Hispanic black, or non-Hispanic white, and then went to saying white and black. So, you know, it can get very confusing when it comes to how language is used. So it is important for us to pay attention to every word that's used. And with that, that's pretty much all I have to share. And thanks for the program. Thanks for allowing me to speak.
Much obliged, caller in Florida. Words are very important. The "you are not your body," I thought that was significant as well. That was the segment they had the young black child where he had been abused and shoved off of his bicycle by some race soldier. I mean, that alone, like, really. And she said, I tell him all the time, you are not your body. What does that, like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I don't know what that means. Nor I'm not really sure how that applies to this situation. Like, some grown race soldier comes and terrorizes me and throws me off of my bike, and you say, you are not your body. Like, I don't even know how to get started with that. Like, I'm in my body, and he violated. Like, he threw me off the bike. You know, I'm in pain. Like, what? How does that help me remedy this situation? How does that help me understand what happened? And how does that help us make sure that that never happens again? You saying you are not your body. And that's, like, very common. You are not your body. You are not your skin color, and I have no idea what any of that means, nor do I understand how that helps us solve problems. Even if it's just, well, we do have racists in the world. Like, at least that's a little bit like, oh, okay, what's a racist? And we can have a conversation about that. Like, oh, okay, wow. Learn something we got, as opposed to you are not your body. If they have like a fire, they talk about the fireworks and all that. It's supposed to be safe this weekend, and maybe you're having a pool party or something, pool safety. I don't think, if you're at risk for a fire, I don't want somebody to come and say, hey, you are not your body. It's getting hot in here. Hey, you are not your body. Or the drowning, same thing. Like, I'm having a hard time breathing. Hey, you are not your body. That is a big part. That right there, that is a big part of why this problem continues. Is so much. Words are so important, and logic. So, man, she said, now, I'm not a parent. I've said consistently, I don't have any confusion at all. The most difficult job in the known universe, being an attempted parent, as a non-white parent, so-called black parent, under a system of white supremacy. That is a job I do not have, do not want. I cannot imagine. You're a father, you're a mom. Someone has shoved your 11-year-old. Some white man just comes and throws your child on the ground. Get out of my neighborhood. What are you doing around here? Cursing at him and all the rest of it? Like, what? Again, now that's no reckless production of offspring. In my view, that's the sort of thing you have to think about in advance. We're going to have this black child. They're going to be abused, terrorized. Anything could happen. They might have to play dead in a church because a race soldier has come to kill black people, or a grocery store. Any of these things could happen. None of this would be the first time. So we got to think about all that in advance. So we already got to be thinking, how are we going to explain all of this to them so they can try to keep themselves safe and so that they won't be confused about what's happening. Let's take time so we can already think about how we want to explain this. How do we explain this to a 3-year-old? How do we explain this to a 5-year-old? Let's already, talk through that. Practice about that. Make sure that we have an understanding about the importance of that process and what that should look like. Let's accumulate resources and all the rest. See if we can talk to some other parents who've done this. Hey, we're going to put the time and energy to do this correctly. If not, that is a part of, again, racists are most to blame. That's centuries of terrorism, black people being punished for talking about racism, being confused, not having resources to accurately understand and learn about racism. None of that makes it any better. None of that changes the truth being, we do not do a good job talking to non-white children about racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works. Horrible. And again, hey, you can't teach what you don't know. So, that's not a big surprise, but wow, we are horrible at it. Horrible. Huge job. You're going to produce non-white offspring. Make sure I am going to do an extraordinary job, way above and beyond the call of duty, talking to my child about this, explaining this as best I can, often as I can, and making sure that this open line of communication. Talk to me at any time. Let me know if something comes up you don't understand or you want to review something or ask questions about something. This is something we're all trying to learn and solve. Thinking about seriously. While I'm saying that, before I check, see if anybody has anything they want to get in before we conclude, that commentary about the man cave, so-called 100-inch television, system of racism, white supremacy. I think Mr. Fuller has talked about having ingenuity rooms and all of that. The way that we use our time and energy, our space in our residence, our time, all of that should reflect a seriousness. You got a 100-inch television, you intend to do some serious TV watching. I don't think you get a 100-inch television to watch one show every other week. I could be wrong. I've never owned a 100-inch TV screen. As opposed to 100-inch screens, having 100 books about a wide range of topics. That, I think, is what universal man, universal woman looks like. I even understand the technology about how to build that 100-inch screen, as opposed to, yes, I need this screen so I can watch TV. Maybe he can't. He said he does electrical work, but still, I haven't seen, maybe I haven't seen Real Housewives. I haven't seen it, so maybe I don't know what I'm missing. I don't think in a system of white supremacy, if you're a victim, I don't think that should be the investment, a 100-inch screen. Even if you are in entertainment, if you are Will Smith even, I don't know, a 100-inch screen? Anyway, any folks need commentary they need to get in before we get ready to wrap things up? Anything else?
Peace.
Do you have commentary, sir?
Yes, appreciated. So, for one, I just wanted to mention for everyone, if you are in a place where some of these actions are occurring for Mumia Abu-Jamal coming up tomorrow, July 3rd, just want to point toward that. And organizers out there in Philly have a website called Love Not Fear, which is named after the activities that are raising up out there as of this year. Love Not Fear, fear spelled PHEAR.com, and you can find spots where they're raising up action around Mumia Abu-Jamal to commemorate 40 years of him being inside behind this madness that he's been enslaved behind. And so just want to raise that up, especially just in acknowledgement of the crucial journalism that goes on here on the Cows, as well as Black Talk Media Project writ large. And Mumia is emblematic of that. So I wanted to just really underline that as far as this question of how journalism and truth-seeking and clarity gets enslaved and just constrained at all turns out here. And that's part of what goes on. And I also just want to shout out again the highlighting behind, for example, what went on in Deep River, Connecticut, that you were just, mentioning again, as far as this, I believe the child was 11 years old, this 11-year-old child, and just the absolute necessity of us always improving, always increasing our capacity as regards self-defense and self-defense writ large, for whatever that entails, for where we are, because we're constantly, in a place of onslaught, and we have to, constantly be on that level of awareness, in my view, and based on observation, et cetera. So again, greatly appreciated, and peace to all y'all.
Much obliged, good sir. Looks like tomorrow, 1 to 5, they have an event at Thomas Paine Plaza, Broad and JFK. That's in Philadelphia. LoveNotFear.com, PHEAR, Love Not Fear, from 1 to 5 tomorrow in Philadelphia. So if you're in the area, 1 to 5 should be a group there for Mumia Abu-Jamal. 40 years, a portion of that on death row. Mumia Abu-Jamal. Folks still working diligently to see if they can get him liberated. The great city of brotherly love. That'll be tomorrow, July 3rd, other side of the continent. Let's see. We did our time for the evening, and we will be here tomorrow. White guest. We're talking about Buffalo and Joseph G. Christopher. And as I said, for this white fella, Neil Krauss, Dr. Neil Krauss, to write a whole book on the history of white supremacy, racism, with some of the main characters in the book we're reading on the book club about Joseph G. Christopher, the mayor at the time, Mayor Griffin, mentioned prominently in this book. I'm sure Ed Cosgrove, who was the district attorney at the time, and some of the other prominent white officials, I'm sure they will pop up, in the rest of the book as I'm finishing it up this evening. But we'll be looking forward to talking to him tomorrow. I think his book does give a lot of great detail about how racism, white supremacy explains that massacre that took place last month. But again, Joseph Christopher should have been in this book. White people leaving him out. That is probably part of the reason why you have so few non-white people, even those who lived in, have connections to New York State, no memory of this event. White people have done a very excellent job suppressing obfuscating, erasing. Huge part of what they do. And again, all of that is deception, withholding information so that people don't have access, so they can have an accurate understanding of things. All of that is a part of deception. Tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, the book Race, Neighborhoods, and Community, Power, Buffalo Politics, 1934 to 1997. Dr. Neil Krauss. Much obliged for all the folks tuning in. If you are doing anything for the so-called holiday weekend, safety. They have rules against firecrackers here, intelligent. If you are out and about, it is all about sobriety. I would be very aware of your surroundings. If it looks like, ooh, this is getting rowdy. This looks like something where enforcement officials might be summoned. Exit. Nothing that happens over this time period should produce more problems. It should just be, we can have some constructive good time, have a little fun, eat some healthy foods, fresh fruits and vegetables, middle of summertime, go to the farmer's market. But no conflict, no brawls, no problems. Already got enough of those. All of that said, if you're out and about in a vehicle, you are for sure sober. Sobriety check. Well, I would not want to hit a sobriety checkpoint if I could help it, even sober. But I would be real mindful of that over the next few days. Sober, buckled up, not on your mobile device while you are in your vehicle, especially if you are traveling, so you are far from your residence. That said, Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in. No name calling, no gossiping, no reckless production of offspring. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.